Oh, I should turn on my light.
It takes like 20 minutes for YouTube to start up. Jesus. Here we go. All right, guys, we're here. The Tubcast has started. I know that I'm 10 minutes late. You can't blame me. I have two women in the mix, all right? It's never my fault. That's how it
Except
is.
I was there on time, Dev. How could you?
So,
I only
hello,
took
Lilith.
2 hours to get ready.
How's it going, Lilith?
Hello,
I
Jonas.
am pretty well. It's a
Baczynski.
pretty sunny day. It was raining a lot lately,
Simple
and
name.
not so sunny California lately. And
It's
yeah,
a sunny day. I'm going to spend it inside, being an autist. The best way to spend a
exactly.
sunny day. Hey, are you excited for the final episode of The Last of Us tomorrow? It's a season ending, season finale.
Oh, yeah, they're gonna have to pack a lot in that one episode. I am a bit
Yeah.
excited though.
And we don't got to watch shitty TV anymore until the next show comes out.
Are you looking forward to season 2 when we get to see Abby?
No. No, I am
No one
not.
is.
No one is.
Okay, what's wrong with the
that'll-
Last of Us TV show?
It's not very good.
Okay.
It's
I
only
thought it's
so.
alright.
Have
Pretty
you
good.
also hi Taftach is here too. Hello.
Yes. Hello. I've been
Yes,
watching
you
it with my
forgot to
girlfriend,
introduce her.
and she's like really into the games and played them all, but I never did. So like, I don't know how well it tracks or.
I play the games, and my girlfriend also played the games, and also my roommate, who's my editor, he also played the game. So we all know a fair amount about it. I've played them several times. I was a Last of Us 1 fan until The Last of Us 2 retroactively ruined everything, and now I can't even play the first game anymore. I'm that kind of autist.
Just pretend the second one doesn't happen.
Yeah, I can't do it with Star Wars and the terrible sequel trilogy either. I just can't do it. But when it comes to the TV show is like okay. It's mediocre, which by 2023 standards, considering all the woke nonsense that gets shit out onto the airwaves, is pretty good. You know? It's not a great show, but this is as good as it's gonna get for a while, I think.
Yeah, I liked the Bill and Frank episode because I just like the idea that they're like going through this world and we're getting like little vignettes of like how different people live and how different people approach and respond to the apocalypse. And I feel like
Yep.
we got to really see that with Bill and Frank, like this tiny little blossoming love story, and how like even among all of this destruction, some people are able to create something meaningful. I thought that was cool.
Yep, I entirely agree. I thought it was pretty good. Like,
And
how
it's
they handled it.
it's
They
just
handled
well told, right, Lilith?
Yeah, they handled the relationship with tact. I like the fact that we start the episode with like Bill being all like, "Don't tread on me. The new world order ain't gonna get me," and he ended up being vindicated, being right.
The schizo posters were correct after all.
Yes.
And what's funny about that too, as soon as he came on screen, like before we saw the flags or anything, I was like, he's giving me libertarian vibes. And then I felt so vindicated as soon as I saw the flag. I was like, oh my god, look at that. He's got the Gadsden.
Yep.
Fuck.
And only for it to turn out. Well, it's not only for it to turn out like for it to turn out to be like to have like a trad gay relationship, and I thought it was really wholesome and nice.
It was wholesome. I agree.
I completely disagree. No gays on TV allowed. Only lesbians. That's how it should be.
So you really liked the DLC episode then?
Yes. No, I mean, it was a good episode for sure, but I think it actually, it wasn't perfect. And one is that they changed the story drastically from the game. because that wasn't the Bill and Frank part of the game. That's not
Right.
how that part of the game went.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
so if you're like a story purist, you're gonna object based on that, and it's like, okay, fair enough. Um, I'm not a story purist, so if a change is good, then it's good. So I don't care too much. But if you are a purist, you're gonna object.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, like
these
I don't think the show has been trying to be a story purist from the beginning,
No, it
so
hasn't.
I give that
They've
a
changed a few
pass.
things. Yeah, a few major things. In fact, they've changed. But the complaint that um me, Arch, and Kibbs all said in our watch party videos with Lilith was that basically the show's other story arcs needed more time to cook, and it feels like both of the flashback episodes, the Bill and Frank episode and the Ellie episode, took away from time that we needed in the present, because there's only 9 episodes this season, and we like it almost feels like the show needs 2 more episodes just to pack everything in, and they had 2 episodes that were side stories. It's like, well, that kind of doesn't feel very good, right?
interesting. Because I got the
I
perspective
say,
that they just didn't have like a ton of material to work with as far as like story. And so they were trying to like fill things up by exploring parts of the world. Um, and I feel like with video game stories, oftentimes the actual story is like a much smaller percentage of the total gameplay. Because a lot of times you're just like running around, killing people, retrying things, collecting resources, whatever. And then the
Yep.
actual story is like in between all of that and might only comprise like a few hours. And so I just assumed that they were like, we don't have a lot to work with, so we got to like fill that in. But I also have heard complaints from people about like Pedro Pascal. He's capturing like one aspect of Joel, but only one aspect, and it would be cool to see like more elements of his personality.
Yeah. For me, it's like that the most recent episode in with the cannibal cultists,
Mhm.
that needed like another full episode to build up the menace of the opposing villain there. That seemed like it was way too rushed. You know what I mean? Just some things needed more time to cook, so they needed more screen time. Um, Also, there's the fact that I don't know if you've been keeping your finger on the pulse of what's surrounding the show, but there was that the guy who directed the Bill and Frank episode. He later came out and said, "Haha, I made right-wing gamers watch a gay romance." And it's like, all
Cringe.
right, dude. All
that's
right.
kind of cringe. Just focus
Yeah.
on creating a good story. I mean,
Yeah,
which he
exactly.
did. I mean, that episode was solid. I mean,
Yeah.
but the response was kind of childish.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I will also say, like when they were like, "Oh, we are communists," and like I don't know, the second most recent episode, and they're like, "Look how great our communist commune is." I was like sitting there like seething about it. I was like, "That's bullshit.
And what your
Communists would
girlfriend
not be
beside you is like
successful."
your girlfriend beside you is like, "Haha, you're actually wrong, Taftach.
Yeah,
It's
it's
time to
like
read Marx."
I need like a little bell to ring to be like, "This is bullshit."
Well, I mean,
Ding,
I
ding,
think
ding, 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 ding.
I think after they leave, Ellie actually asks Joel, "Is that how America was like before?" And Joel said, "No, America was too big to work like that," which I
Mm.
think
Which,
is actually the point.
yeah,
It's that communism probably does work for these small, isolated communities. In fact, we know it does. That's the Zapatista thing in Mexico, right? Like the Zapatista inhabited territory in Mexico, southern Mexico, one of the most poorest, resource deprived areas of the world. You can't fucking grow anything there. There's like no natural resources. There's fucking nothing there, and they're legitimately communists because it turns out that some social organization is better than no social organization when you have nothing. You know what I mean? So it works for them, but as soon as you actually advance to having technology that is more than fucking rocks, communism doesn't work.
yeah, I figured that was a pretty good point on Joel's part, or the writer to have written to have Joel say, because like communism does sometimes work when it's like in very small, isolated like communes. Not
Yeah.
maybe not isolated always, but like usually isolated.
Oh,
So it's
and
like
also,
but it's like his quote
Maybe
was
not
like America
isolated.
was too big for it,
yeah,
and
I think is it Fee? Is it Freedom Economic Education? It's a YouTube channel. They put out like a little video saying that this wasn't communism because the Amish operate the exact same way, and they're not communists, right? But they have a commune structured the same way that the Jacksonville people did in The Last of Us. And no one would call the Amish communists, even though they live collectively. So
Yeah, I would also just say that, like, I don't know, it's probably not really technically communism, right? Like, the only reason,
it's not real communism.
yeah, like,
From the other side this
literally
time.
not, but like just from the other side, where I think that a lot of times more lefty people, if it's not working, they'll just be like, it's not real communism. But if things are working on like a small scale or whatever, and it's not really communism, like it's not really how Marx or Lenin or Engels or whoever envisioned it, they will like not apply that. They'll kind of just be like, well, it is, yeah, it's example of our ideas working, which I think is a little silly.
Yeah.
But it's also, we don't exactly know like the power structure or anything about like how it is working in this show. So we can't really say, like, maybe it is like actually communist and it's like working despite them having like totally ridiculous structures, and like I would say that's silly. But it also could be like the opposite, where like it's actually just like communist branding and it's working because it relies on like more fundamentally correct truths about the world. So I don't know. It seems like a little bit silly to like super debate it, but I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
they're painting it in a positive light without actually exploring anything about how it works. So I can't actually critique it. I just have to like sit here.
Communism
see.
works only when society has collapsed and there's no more manufacturing or industrialization or travel or anything else. And
Mhm.
it's just like agrarian societies, communism works. Okay, I understand.
Yeah, and I do kind of agree with your point. Like, if you do have a lot of social cohesion, like the Amish do, or like you could have in like a small community, you can get away with a lot more just because like you don't have to rely on the same networks of information and control that like markets provide. So, yeah, I think it's a fair point.
Anyway, I guess I brought that up because Lilith and I have been doing that project. We've been watching a video every week, and we've been making a video every week about The Last of Us, and we're doing the finale tomorrow. I can't
Nice.
wait. Next we can watch Star Trek Picard and then fucking shoot ourselves. Such a bad show.
You guys are just going through it.
Today we're talking about the 2600 trans emails leak, otherwise known as the 2600 emails of hate? Is that what they're called?
Yes.
Hold on, give me a second.
And this was not leaked but published by the same person that I'm not so sure if they themselves leaked it, but they were responsible for getting the no-fly list out in public.
Was there a no-fly list at some point? What's the story there?
Oh, are you not aware of the American no-fly list? Well, okay, after 9/11, there was like a big call for like security updates and stuff in America. I'm not so sure. I think the no-fly list could have existed before that, but it was like only had like a handful of people. But after 9/11, it exploded into like thousands and thousands of people.
Right.
So what happened?
I think I remember this now. Yeah.
Yes. So what happened was like you're not allowed to know who's on the no-fly list. They won't publish it. So the only way you can know that if you're on a no-fly list or not is if you are going to get a plane ticket, show up to the airport, and then the TSA guys go through your list, see your name, and be like, "Oh, sorry, you can't go on a flight. Also, you can't go on any flights. Also, you're no refunds."
No refunds. Fuck.
So
Let's see.
this I think like trans or non-binary individual just straight up like posted who was on the no-fly list because apparently the TSA's security for their list is just like not hidden at all. It's just like it was just like a massive security flaw and when it comes to their no-fly list. So it was
Isn't it
just
great
like
when that happens? Yeah, like there are so many times when like, oh, something was leaked. How'd you find it? Oh, it turns out that the guy's password was like a password. It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
basically.
like there's truly no real hack jobs out there. Like no one's actually getting hacked. Everyone's just being stupid about their internet security for the most part. Like 99% of the time, it's just someone being dumb.
No one's like that cyberpunk like hacker at the screen with all the swirling text. It's just
Yeah,
like,
hacker man.
yeah.
I must plug myself into the mainframe and get through the multi firewalls. All right.
Or it's like someone sends like a phishing email to like some 80-year-old boomer and they just like click some like awful link.
Yeah, let me pull up you have all the links, right, Taftach?
Yeah,
You know what's
they're all
going on?
the Discord ones, right?
Yeah, I put a bunch in the group chat, and so did Lilith. Let me just find the links that I want. Uh, I still have open that clip of Stardust saying that Moldbug was based.
That is pretty funny.
Oh fuck! Wait, while you were doing your debate last night, Taftach, I was actually talking with her. She wanted Gamergate deep lore
I
back from
see.
2014. I was like, really? We're still talking about Gamergate? She's like, yeah. She's gonna talk to Brianna Wu about it for some reason.
You're like the wise old sage.
Yeah, since I was deep into Gamergate back when it happened, so I brought everything that I had to the table.
You were there from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, so were you, Lilith. You were involved in it, right?
I mean, I talked about it a bit, and I had like mutuals on it, but like not nearly as involved as like a bunch of other people were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when did that happen? Was it like 2016?
It was 2014, and that's
2014.
where I first
Okay.
encountered you, Lilith. I saw you posting about Gamergate.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
well everybody did. A lot of people did. But
Yeah,
See, I was 14 then. So I
2014.
remember it happening, but like only very vaguely. And I was not like super plugged in what
Yeah,
was
I
happening.
had to inform her that the reason that Milo Yiannopoulos and Mike Cernovich even exist and have a career is because of Gamergate.
Mhm.
They both first became like notable people by engaging with Gamergate. Lots of people did. Sargon did, you know. For my one drop of notoriety, I did. So
See, I remember like Sargon blowing up and stuff, but like not really knowing the context of the issue or what was going
mhm.
on.
I mean the TLDR is just basically that Zoe Quinn cheats on boyfriend with notable people in games journalism. Um, the conversation splits into two camps. You have the progressives saying that it's all about sexism against women because how dare you go after this chick for her sexual life. The gamer side of it was saying, hey, it turns out we actually discovered that all of these people are trading money and you're giving each other favors and not revealing any of it. And that's where the ethics conversation came from. And then both of those narratives kind of struggled for dominance, and it was the progressive one that eventually won out.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember Anita Sarkeesian being really big, and I followed like The Amazing Atheist back in the day because I
Oh,
was like
I'm
an edgy
sorry.
atheist.
Oh,
Um,
you were going around like tipping your fedora everywhere?
yeah, exactly. When I was like
my
13,
lady.
14, and I was like big into libertarianism and stuff. Um,
Hmm.
but I can definitely, it's interesting that it became so much broader and so much more political because of how it tied into feminism and this sort of growing sense from people that the progressive left had really infiltrated a lot of areas of culture. And so I think that also ties into like the NRX stuff because like Moldbug,
Antonio
yeah,
Gramsci.
Antonio Gramsci and like Moldbug is like sounding the alarm on this on
Hmm.
his blog. And so it really becomes like a much bigger thing than just ethics in games journalism.
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually I talked about this on Stardust show last night that basically all day yesterday I've been finally writing my Gramsci script. Taftach, when you and I talked in the summer, I said I was reading the prison notebooks. Now I'm making the video.
Impressive.
I'm actually making it in response to some dumb shit that Done Left said on Twitter. I'm like, this is fucking retarded. I need to respond to this nonsense. So I basically like I went off. I left Stardust stream for the night. I worked a bit more. I went to bed. I woke up. I kept writing Gramsci right up until we did this stream. I've been doing nothing but Gramsci for like 3 or 4 days now.
That's
It's
impressive.
it's kind of it's kind of mind numbing, I have to admit. But that video will come out next week. Um, And fuck yeah, Moldbug. Man, um, Adam Friended has asked me to do because I finished reading the open letter to open-minded progressives.
Mhm.
I finished reading that like a couple weeks ago. And Friended was like, Dev, you gotta like tell me your problems with this. Because that's like Moldbug's maybe not most famous, but definitely most like
It's older
it's
is the problem.
yeah.
But I've also
Oh,
read it. I've also read like a few of his other works.
mhm. But I mean that the open letter is what gets progressives to become right wing in the neo-reactionary sense. That's the actual pipeline. That's the fish hook. That's what reels people in. That's why I thought it was funny when Stardust said, "This guy's pretty based."
It's like, yes, the beginning. Yeah, I will say the Distributist, he made a really good video on Moldbug, which I recommend people check out. It's a gentle introduction to Mencius Moldbug. He made it 3 years ago, so like pretty recently.
If you want to turn into a fascist, this is what you must read.
And I would, yeah, definitely recommend that because I think that
You would definitely turn into a fascist.
is just a really easy introduction to some of the stronger ideas that Moldbug has. I don't know if you've recognized this, Dev, but I think that Moldbug is very inconsistent with some of the
Yes.
strength of his ideas. And he will sometimes say shit where you're like, that is the worst logic I've ever heard for that. Or he'll just like come out of nowhere. And I think it's because a lot of his writing comes from like blog era where everything's like very serialized and he like has this pressure to continually release stuff. And some
Yeah.
of them are just like not bangers. But I think that if you take him at his like steelman, if you try to really understand him and the better versions of his ideas, he does have something to offer.
Oh, for sure, for sure. If you talked to me 5 years ago, I would show nothing but disdain for a lot of people that I've now read. And at this point, I've realized like every single person who is notable, especially if they're notable for writing something, they have at least one good idea.
Yeah, for sure.
And that applies to people like Karl Marx, even them, right? Like everyone, regardless of political slant. They are notable for a reason. They're not just idiots, even if you don't like their ideas, right? So it's important to read everyone. It's important to read everyone and everything as much as you can.
What about Hitler, Dev? Huh?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Hitler had good points?
Yes. Hitler had good
Oh.
points. Clip it and ship it, baby. It's okay. The
Welcome to
people
get
who would
clipped
hate that.
up to the end of time.
Wait, Lilith, you say it too, so that we can all be clipped together. We can all be canceled. But no, basically everyone, even if you're looking over a an ideology that you completely disagree with, it's good to look over anyway. It's good to know. It's good to know things,
Oh yeah, definitely agree. Like even if you completely disagree, like it's still good to like recognize the rhetoric they use and how they've came to that conclusion, and like
Oh god, this is Dev's Kanye arc. Fuck. Oh man.
oh, Hitler
But
was
yeah,
a pretty cheap writer though. Like I
mhm,
tried reading Mein Kampf and then I just like
yeah.
fell asleep because it was just so fucking boring.
Not even your virulent hatred of Jews could get you through it, eh, Lilith?
How dare you? I love the Jews.
Thanks, Dollar. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
Oh wait, are
thank
you
you.
Jewish, Taftach?
I am. They're my mother.
Oh, I didn't know.
Mhm.
You don't have the nose, man.
I don't. Yeah. I do not look very Jewish, but I definitely am reminded of it by right wingers occasionally.
Oh, do they bring it up?
Yeah, they're like, that explains a lot about you. And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
What's really funny is like, my girlfriend is at least partially Ashkenazi,
Mhm.
but she's been like there's no tradition of it in her family at all because she's gone from like immigrating from her family's gone from like Germany to Holland, to the UK, to Canada, and there's been some intermixing with French in there along the way. So like her last name is a very common Jewish last name, but
Mhm.
there's no history of practice or tradition in her family for like 400 years. So she's like the most non-Jewish person. Doesn't
Yeah,
even
I
look
also
Jewish,
have
right?
a Jewish last name, and like I did
Yeah.
not grow up with it really,
Mhm.
just because like my mom was not very religious, or she was like
Mm.
spiritual, but like not, yeah, not very
Yeah,
traditional.
you can't even find like practicing Jewish members of her family if you go back 3 or 4 generations. So it's just like
Wow,
it's like an ethnic
just the name
quirk.
stuck.
Just the
Interesting.
name stuck. Yeah. Oh, someone in the
So
chat.
is she
Are they ever going to talk about
like
the
Jewish
emails?
on her
Oh,
mother's side?
I'm not sure. I don't know the full details. Actually, you know what? I think it's from her father. So
Hmm.
probably
Okay.
not. Yeah, because
So not
Jewishness goes through the mother,
matrilineal.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh well. Does Taftach work in a bank?
I do not. I should. The bank should hire me, I think.
They should hire you.
Hmm.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough monkeying around. Even though I love monkeying around, we should probably actually talk what we're supposed to talk about, eh?
I agree.
The emails. Wait, can I hold on? Can I actually share? Oh, Mr. Bruh just joined the D Club. Thanks, buddy.
I think you might have to like just not include the section where their actual email is shown.
Why?
I'm not so sure. I don't know if YouTube will allow it.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm
I
not.
mean, if not, then we'll just black that section out, I guess.
Dox everyone. Dun, dun, dun. Hold on. So you guys should be able to see what I'm,
Yeah.
and it doesn't interfere with
Well,
Taftach's
actually, the
feed.
emails should be like representative emails, so it might not be a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's all like public knowledge, right? Yeah. Yeah, I know, Lilith, you and I disagree on the doxing question, but when it comes to elected representatives, fuck them. Dox them all. we need more David DePapes. That's a joke. All right, for legal reasons, that's a joke. Yeah, let's
Jeez.
see. Okay, I'm gonna pull it up. All right, so this is the 2,600 pages of hate released by this person. Okay. And I'm not sure if this. I guess it took off. It has like 15 million views, so that counts as taking off for sure. And this is okay. By the way, this person published it on her blog on maya.crimew.gay.
Yeah. Very trans woman of her.
Yeah, and this is very like 1999 era internet. Look at this cat.
Oh yeah,
The cat is so
Look,
cute.
here. The cat follows
I
your
love the
cursor
cat.
around.
It
Here.
licks itself and falls asleep. It's so
Here,
cute.
can I like here? I'm making just for this. I'm making the screen really big. Okay, so here, let me just chat. Just give me a second. Okay, I made the screen really big. Watch my cursor. Look at the cat. It runs over, and then it like scratches, falls asleep. If you move the cursor, it wakes up and follows up.
Yawns.
It's pretty
Man,
great.
I feel like I'm back in 1999.
Oh, you
The
go.
way the shit.
Yeah, it's like
But then also,
Isn't-
like, if you scroll down, she's got like all of the, I don't even know what these are called, but they're like cute and they're flashing and they're,
I think they're like called like stamps or something.
yeah, stamps at the bottom of the website.
Give me a
Yeah.
second. I'm just gonna resize the video to put it back where it was. Man, remember like live journals and guest books and shit? Feels just like that. Like back in the old days. Okay, there we go. I think I can. There we go. Okay. So, oh yeah. Dude, this is like your old GeoCities website.
Mhm.
Have a bunch of these. Man, it's so strange to see this in 2023. You know. But okay.
And they say trans people can't be trad. They're literally returning to tradition.
Returning to old internet traditions. So let's see. The emails, 2,600 pages of hate. a collection of emails from 2019 and 2021 between dozens of anti-trans expert witnesses, U.S. right-wing lawmakers, and conservative legal groups. There's the torrent if you want to download them for yourself. Many pages, 60 gigs, pretty quick download. This cat's actually kind of annoying trying to read now. So this file contains the complete source of email threads for the 2023 Mother Jones story inside the secret working group that helped push anti-trans laws across the country. The emails are comprised of communications spanning 2019-2021, principally regarding an attempt to pass a trans youth transition treatment ban in South Dakota in 2019, spearheaded by Republican Representative Fred Deutsch, and Senator Lee Schoenbeck. These are extensive discussions between Deutsch and notorious anti-gay and anti-trans experts associated with known hate groups targeting transgender healthcare in the United States. Okay, and this is just a description of what's going on in the emails. So Lilith, you brought this to my attention, and you said this would be something actually that's probably pretty important to talk about. So what is your take on it first?
Okay, so my take on it is like we've seen like a recent like huge surge of like just anti-trans like rhetorics and like these laws that are just getting pushed out by like Republicans everywhere, and like not just Republicans, just like not just Republicans in America, but also like right-wing like figures in across the sea. And there was always like an inkling that like what is causing all this, like why a huge surge when this wasn't like a huge thing before? Like, is it a grassroots thing where are people just like genuinely concerned? Like, have the left gone too far? It's also a common thing, but like these emails kind of show like that they're not so grassroots, whereas just like these are like politicians like working with hate groups to try to gain votes and try to like gain popularity amongst like their more fringe constituents, when it's shown like even amongst Republicans, like a lot of these positions aren't very popular, especially when it comes to like banning surgeries and transitioning care altogether when it comes to adults, and sometimes in a case where they're even against like banning treatment on children. So it's like yeah.
I mean, I tend to agree. I think that a lot of politics is not really that grassroots. A lot of it's led by people who are activists and people who are very interested in the issues. What I would guess is that like there's a group of very intelligent lawyers and activists and politicians and also just constituents who are, they're not like the majority of the people, but they're making huge stinks, and they're really bringing it to lawmakers' attentions, and that's probably why we're seeing this this coordination. But this is common through all of politics. No matter the issue, there's always emails going along between people trying to figure out, how do we get this put into policy, how do we get this in law? And yeah, I don't know, I'm not super surprised that this political position that is like for the restriction of trans healthcare is being pushed in this way.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think if you saw like there's probably a left wing equivalent where you have pro-trans groups, you have pro-trans activists.
Yeah.
You're gonna have like lawmakers all who are all very pro-trans. There's probably emails of them talking about how they can coordinate to push their own agenda as well. This is something that's pretty normal in politics. Yeah.
But I think that like the transparency is quite good, right? Because I think a lot of people don't recognize that this is how politics is done, and it allows people to be quite manipulative in ways that are probably not healthy for politics, right? So I don't necessarily have an issue with a small group of people like exercising more control, but the fact that it is so shadowy, I do think creates issues. So I don't know. Obviously, there's like legal ramifications about leaking this, but hopefully it pushes politics in a more honest direction.
Right. It's not such a big surprise that politicians are working with groups, but like they've never been so like exposed as to like working and coordinating with like hate groups to just like push their agenda.
Well, I think it
Like,
keeps them
normally,
honest, right?
normally
Are there actually
politicians
hate
try to
groups?
put like an air of like, oh, we're being objective. We're just trying to go do the truth here, and we're just looking at the data. Whereas these emails show like they're not looking at the data. Instead, they're cherry picking like doctors and like and quote unquote experts from associations that are just like known to be like their whole group is
It's
just
very
their whole agenda.
ideology driven
Yeah,
first, right?
Yeah.
yes.
And like
Yeah.
speaking of Moldbug, it gets to his idea of formalism, where he's saying that like these political structures, these power structures, they need to be formalized and they need to be transparent. And yeah, I think this is an example of politics that is often not transparent or formalized. However, I think we'll probably get into it. Like, I don't necessarily think that they're entirely wrong with some of their assertions about the nature of trans healthcare.
The ultimate black pill is if you decide to go down the elite theory anti-ideology rabbit hole, or the realist rabbit hole, where it's I saw that smile, Taftach. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I think so. I think
Where
I
it's
know where
like,
you're going.
where it's like the ideas behind all of this don't actually matter, and it's all just groups jockeying for power, and they're just waving whatever flag they can. I don't agree with that take, but it's pretty common among the neo-reactionaries. I don't think it's correct, but
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily correct either. It's a little bit more nuanced than that.
yeah, I'm gonna have to do a video on ideology at some point, because if you look at like the old, as a real quick aside, because I keep going off on tangents. If you look at if you look at the old anti-SJWs, one of the insults that we all used back in the day to talk about, the internet feminists, was that they were too ideological.
Mhm.
And what we were really getting at, even though we didn't really know it, is that if you rigidly follow an ideology, even when the ideology doesn't map onto reality, you start to have some serious problems. That's the real socialism has never been tried, right? That's what that is. Is that, well, it's never been tried because the ideology is different from reality. However, if you're completely anti-ideology, then you have no morals, right? You have no moral framework that you're operating from. You have no principles. So you literally just do whatever you can to gain power. And that's also bad, right? So
Mhm.
I think there's a golden mean here when it comes to the issue of ideology. I'm gonna have to flesh it out a little bit more. There's something there, I think, though.
I think there is. I've actually been thinking a lot about this recently. And I think that when we talk about like power for power's sake, we optimize really for like this kind of accelerationist efficiency. And that's like
Mhm.
people talking about turning undesirables into like biofuel because they're more valuable that way. And I think that is deeply anti-human. It is,
Is that a Nick Land idea? It sounds like it might be.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely tangential, where what is like efficient for the machine is not necessarily good for the human. And I think that ideology is kind of the antidote to that, but also ideology can lead to deeply destructive things, and not all ideologies are equal. I think some ideologies are deeply cruel and or just deeply misinformed. And I think that kind of the purpose of politics is to root out the ideologies that are leading to good spiritual and personal development for people.
Mhm.
What do you
That's why you're
think?
on your virtue ethics arc, eh?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm on my virtue ethics arc. What do you think of that, Lilith?
Mm, I, I pretty much agree. Like, should be less. Um, sorry about that.
That's okay.
My mouth is dry.
Mine
There should
too.
be like.
Wait, you're smoking too much weed, Lilith.
I actually like stopped smoking weed a few days ago, but like,
Oh, congrats.
but yeah. think like a lot of these people, they try to present an air of just like objectivity when it's just like, as these emails shows, like there was one from Mr. Deutsch where he's like oh, the ACLU saying like is putting out all these studies about like how transitioning is positive for mitigating suicidal tendencies, and it's just like, how do we respond to that? It's just like, how do we go against their the studies and be like, no, it's like it's actually doesn't actually make you less suicidal when
It's very motivated reasoning, right?
Yeah, it's just exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we
Yeah.
disprove this, rather than asking, is this true? Could we be wrong? You're starting with the conclusion first.
Yeah. I mean, if you think something is true, you probably should try to disprove it, but that's just to make sure that it's right. You know?
Absolutely,
Like,
absolutely.
it's not if you're coming at it with, I have a goal, I have an answer
Mhm.
that I want to bend the science to reach. I mean, you can probably do that, but it's eventually going to snap back and it's going to be bad for you. You know?
Yeah.
You can't bend reality forever. It's not how things work.
Eventually, if you implement your ideas based on false reality, eventually they'll come crashing down, and
Yeah.
it'll fall apart.
Well, yeah, we've seen this with like flat earthers, where it's just like they start with a conclusion where it's like the Earth is flat, and everybody, all the mainstream scientists, they're all lying to us. So how do we prove our theory is true?
Or like with Lysenkoism in the Soviet Union, right?
Yeah.
Where if you are totally rejecting like gene theory, then you can work off that premise for as long as ideology has an iron grip, but doing so is going to weaken your ability to maintain that grip long term, because you're not operating within reality, and if your enemies are, not good for you.
Here, so if you want to see the emails for yourself, I did grab them.
Whoa.
And there are so many. There's so many emails. Usually when it comes to like a big data dump like this, a lot of the time a bunch of it really does end up being a nothing burger.
Mhm.
It's like one of the emails would be like, "Oh, when are we going out for lunch? Oh, let's meet over here at 11:30." You know, it'll be stuff like that, right? But there are some interesting things in the email packet at least. And I think, Lilith, you had sent a bunch of them. I think it's
Yeah,
these
there was like
tabs here.
threads of people like
Yeah.
combing through it and
Yeah.
finding out
That's-
the notable ones.
That's-
There was
that's-
some
it's
that was
interesting
pretty
ones.
funny, where it's like, are you sure we should be sending this on your legislative email account? Because like if they,
It's so stupid.
yeah, because they're like, they can like obtain it if they ask for it, right?
Yeah, it's like Billy D leaking the game Journo Pros back during Gamergate. It's the same thing, just repeating. Here, let's see. Yeah, this person says thought they were being sneaky. Matt, I've been wondering if the ACLU files suit, are they going to be able to obtain all of our emails because Fred is using his legislative email account?
Nice.
Oops. And then it's like, as always, please don't share this with the media. The longer we can fly under the radar, the better.
That also
Well-
implies that they were expecting to be found out eventually. They're just,
Yeah.
it's a matter of time.
Yeah. And I mean, you see this happening on the other side too. Like the whole stink about the Twitter files, right? At least part of that showed that the FBI might have been acting inappropriately, and Twitter, to their credit, was generally refusing them access. But the FBI was like, hey, can you give us some information? And then was it Yoel Roth who was like, no. And a lot of times he said no. And then all that shit came out, and conservatives lost their fucking mind over it. So it's you can always assume that people are talking about things behind the scenes, no matter what you're dealing with.
Absolutely.
Whether it's like something as big as this or something as small as like your local HOA, somebody's emailing something to somebody.
Yep.
Let's see, what's the next one?
It's sort of like we're peeking into their strategy, their war room in this.
Mhm.
absurdities
The
and
Andrew Tate war
conversations.
room.
Have you
Fuck,
seen
he's
the
so
the
ridiculous.
recent like crazier or not so crazy, the unexpected like take from Andrew Tate versus like Hulk Hogan or Megan Fox?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh.
Because Counterpoints asked that to the panel last night. The
Listen,
obvious
Andrew Tate
answer
is
is Megan Fox, if you're into women. I
he's
think.
unexpectedly based on the trans question on the TQ.
Okay, but that's not really him tweeting, right? It's just like someone who
No.
he gave control of the account to.
No, it was a video.
Yeah, it was a video of
Oh.
him saying it.
Yeah. Here, hold on. I posted the videos to Sargon, so I'll just dig it up real quick and I'll link it.
See,
if
I
you
just
wanna watch
heard
it.
people reference this. I assumed you wrote it.
So,
Hold on,
Chad.
there it is. Okay.
Okay.
Here, hold on.
Big
I'm playing
question.
it. I'm playing it real
Oh,
quick.
you're playing it?
Wait. Okay, here it is.
Building my mansion. You'll see when it's done. We'll do an episode of Cribs. I had to get this area here.
You guys can hear it, right?
Neighbor's house. I had to construct a specific area for the Bugatti. Anyway, that's all gonna be lit up and shit. Bugatti logos. You broke boys don't know. Listen, I recently posted a question on Twitter asking, would you rather have sex with a transsexual, which is a legitimate 10, or a woman, which is a legitimate 1? And everyone's sitting there clicking woman, 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 because they think they're going to be gay if they do anything else. But they're not actually thinking about the question. I am so smart. I operate on so many levels higher than the average man.
Big brain,
you people
guys.
are not thinking about the question. When I say a 1 and a 10, I mean Megan Fox with a dick. That's the tranny. Or Hulk Hogan with a pussy. That's the girl. This is the question I'm asking. Megan Fox or Hulk Hogan? So you're thinking, well, I don't want to be gay, so I just clicked the girl, the number 1, did it? You're gonna fuck Hulk Hogan? Okay, yeah, there's a pussy, but he's got mustache and muscles and shit. He's all hairy, big dude, 6'5". It's pretty gay to me. That sounds pretty gay. I don't care if it's a pussy. That is gay. Whereas Megan Fox, okay, he's got a dick, but maybe you can like scoot it out the way. I'm still Megan Fox. You know what I'm saying? At least she's small and shit. You can get your hand around her neck, mess her up. You ain't messing up Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan's gonna mess you up. So this is the question I'm asking. You need to operate on a higher plane. Think about this. This is important.
He's just
This
transcended.
is cultural. This affects the world we now live in. What is straight? What is gay? It's all a big sliding spectrum, isn't it?
That's how you
Because
get
you're
out
gonna
of the
sit here and go,
matrix.
oh no, it's gay to bang Megan Fox with a dick. I counter that argument. It's gay to bang Hulk Hogan with a pussy. So which one is it?
Wow.
Yep.
Heartbreaking.
Modern day philosopher.
Yeah. He is so transcended.
Heartbreaking. The worst person you know just made a great point.
You see like Andrew Tate, in the yoga pose, floating like a Buddha. And he's just like, the question is not, are traps gay? The question is, what is gay even?
Exactly.
Yes. You have to ask the big,
And you're
bigger
like,
question.
whoa. Holy shit.
Okay, let's see what we got here. Let's go back to what we were talking about. Right. I combed through the first 100 pages and screenshotted the bits that stuck out. So let's see what's interesting in these emails. Let's see. I've begun my road trips across the state to meet with key moderate Republicans. Response has been mixed, but mostly positive. Not a single legislator I've spoken with so far has a clue about what's happening with transgender advocacy, nor affirmative therapy. All of this is new to them. Despite the generally positive response, I have no doubt this will be an uphill battle when we get to session. The last time I introduced a transgender-related bill in 2016, the state and the governor experienced political and economic pressures, including boycott threats from around the country. I doubt this time will be any different. I meet with the governor's top policy advisor next week to discuss the bill. I wonder what bill this is. Probably just one of the many anti-trans bills that we've seen. It may not matter which one it is, actually. Just
There's been like hundreds. It's just like
well, one thing I've noticed.
maybe not as much during 2016 though.
I know that a lot of, let's say, your average, touching grass normie who's unplugged from all this stuff, they see the trans question. That's a bad term for it, but you know what I mean. They see the trans question as being kind of like, the 2000s gay question. Like, should gay people get married? The arguments against that seem to be kind of flimsy. The arguments for that were actually pretty strong. eventually the culture changed and the pro-gay marriage camp won, and that was a good decision in my opinion.
Mhm.
They probably just they're like, the trans people are kind of like gay people, right? It's probably just the same thing as yeah, why not trans rights,
Mhm.
and they're not really thinking that there's actually some significant differences in these conversations. This isn't should trans people get married. Now we're talking about children on hormones. It's a completely different type of conversation, right?
Yeah, I think two
So
things really get them. And one is like
Mhm.
the expectation that through our institutions, we like reify the claim that trans women are women and trans men are men. So, for example, with like sports or whatever, we're basically buying into that statement, which seems kind of like debatable, I think, to a lot of people. It seems very debatable to me, right? And then number two is like the children thing, right? Because people will say, well, now they're coming for your children. They're going to make them transgender. And there's a spreading social contagion. And it's not necessary that trans people transition because look at the studies, they're actually not that strong. And this is just going to take over, and all of your innocent young women, they're going to be turned into men, which is, I think that's what really scares people. And that's why we've seen the two places where anti-trans legislation can pick up steam is when we're talking about children on hormones and whether or not the state, protects the right of trans people to enter into specifically gendered areas.
Mm.
Right. Like most people have no problem like just
Yeah, like if
they
a
see a
guy
trans
wants to wear a
person.
dress, whatever,
Yeah,
like most conservatives like don't care that much if someone does that.
unless you're like Matt Walsh or some freako nut
Right.
job.
But like the normie conservatives, they're like, yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes people are weird and they like wear dresses, but like it's not a societal problem. We don't need to like outlaw that. That seems like crazy and authoritarian to them.
Yeah. Even like when you look at Tucker Carlson's coverage of the big boob teacher in
Mhm.
Ontario, right?
Yeah,
He even said initially, like, listen, if you were just doing this in private and not at a school, no
he
one would care.
did. Hmm.
And that's important, is that if it is in private, no one should care because it's in private, right?
But that's also
Um,
like the autogynephilia thing, right? Because if you believe that trans women are in their day to day life living out a fetish and involving other people in their fetish, that's, I think, how you make the argument that, like, no, this should be restricted just to people's private lives, because as soon as you bring it into the public, you're unconsensually involving people in a sexual interest.
even if they don't know it,
Right. Which is,
right?
I'm very much a believer in autogynephilia, but I think that that is a mischaracterization of what autogynephilia is like. And that's because I think autogynephilia is erotic target location error. So rather than being like attracted to men or women in the typical way, you might be attracted to them in the typical way, in addition to finding that attraction within yourself. And I think that's more similar to the kind of love or romance that someone might have for like their partner, which is not something that we restrict to the bedroom. And so I don't
Yeah,
really
there's
think
like
it makes sense.
there's PDAs and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's just like a way that you love yourself, which I don't think is necessarily sexual. And most trans women who have AGP don't experience it as like a day-to-day sexual experience. Maybe they do at the very beginning of transition. But just like how love will have a honeymoon phase, which is full of passion, eventually that burns out, and it's just kind of like a mild euphoria. And I think that that is more descriptive of the AGP experience and doesn't really lend itself to the arguments about public fetishization.
it actually makes sense. If you go to like a Twitter account like Males of Reddit or something like
Hmm.
that, right? Or like trans people posting their L's. There's tons of accounts like these right now.
Hmm.
You'll see like posts from various subreddits where people are saying like, "Oh man, I dressed up as a girl for the first time and I came like 18 times looking at myself in the mirror." And on the one hand, it's like that sounds like it's a fetish. Like that sounds
Hmm.
like that sounds like it's a fetish and it's not an identity, right? However, I hadn't thought about it in the way that you described before, where like the fetishization aspect kind of wears off over
It
time. That
does.
might be the case too. I'm not sure. I don't know enough about it, but it's an interesting idea.
Well, that's my experience is that like
Mm.
I think I used to find the idea of like dressing like a woman somewhat arousing. And now that's not really the case. And actually, I think that wore off like really quickly. And hormones will also make it wear off more quickly because they kind of kill your sex drive. And so you'll look at like these Reddit comments and they'll say, like, yeah, euphoria boners, they're normal in the beginning and then they go away. And that seems to be the experience of a lot of people because that kind of passionate feeling about something very much very quickly gives way to just kind of like a loving yourself feeling, at least if it goes well.
Now, Lilith, I know that
So-
you might want to say something about AGP.
Yeah,
I can kind of
so,
feel
like-
you. I can feel you
Yeah.
there. So.
You're buzzing.
No, I mean, like, I definitely think, like, for some people, like, AGP is a real thing. Like, as we've seen, like, these screenshots of, like, people discussing their own experiences and stuff. But the problem with the AGP discourse is when hateful people and hate groups try to be like, oh, there is no such thing as actual trans women with gender dysphoria. They are all autogynephiles. And
They're all
that,
fetishists.
Well, even
Yeah, they're all
Blanchard doesn't say
fetishists.
that, right?
yeah, even the guy who coined the term AGP, the Blanchard,
Like Blanchard thinks that trans women should transition and that trans women who are autogynephiles also have like oftentimes a legitimate need that is rooted in medicine that combines with their sexual interests, right? Because not every autogynephile should transition. Most autogynephiles are just men who just like masturbate at home in their, in their room, and they don't need to transition because they don't also have gender identity disorder, right? And that was his point, is that like it's really when you combine dysphoria with autogynephilia that makes people very likely to transition.
There's also like
just
a
hold
lot
on,
of trans
real
women who
quick.
are not autogynephiles. Like we've seen like asexual trans women and like or trans women that just don't have any sort of sex drive whatsoever, and yet they don't get turned on by it. Like appearing as a woman, but they still transition anyway. They still have dysphoria. The problem arises when like these anti-trans hate figures are just like, oh, they're all fetishists and they shouldn't exist in public because they're exposing you to their fetish, whether you know it or not. So that therefore we should outlaw transgenderism altogether. And they use that as like a segue into why trans people should just not exist.
Yeah. And I don't think it's like a fetish so much as just like an alternative sexuality. But sorry, Deb, you go.
Yeah. Just for the sake, because I know my chat probably doesn't know much about this, so we have to explain.
Okay, yeah.
You have to explain Blanchard and his typology. So.
Lilith and I are just going off because we know.
Yeah. I mean, I know too, but like the chat doesn't know. So from what I understand, Blanchard's typology was or is a method of characterizing transsexualism.
Mhm.
And he split it into two groups. You had the homosexual transsexuals, and then you had the autogynephilics. And the autogynephilics were, as you described, Taftach, the people who got off on the idea of themselves being a woman. And then the homosexual transsexuals were the people who decided to look more like women so that they could bottom for gay tops better. That was basically the idea.
Yeah, and like escape homophobia and
Yeah.
just generally integrate through into society easier as like a very feminine gay man was the idea.
Yeah. And so he split up the transsexual experience into these two groups. And there's this view, especially on like 4chan's trans board or whatever, there's this view that like that being a homosexual transsexual is the only real
Mhm.
trans person because those are the ones that want to pass and they want to stealth and they want to be a woman in a relationship with a man in a very and not necessarily trad but in like a straight type relationship. Meanwhile, the AGP people are the ones who are like dressing up in dresses and wanking off and they're the fetishists, right? And that's this view on 4chan,
Which I think is very unfair, by the way.
yeah, it sounds a bit I don't know how to feel about it. I haven't my mind's not made up yet on Blanchard. I don't know. I don't know
I'm all
what to
for
think yet.
AGP rights.
AGP rights.
Exactly. I've been communicating with this person. I think it's Phil Lilly, and they are really interesting autogynephile who is writing a book actually about this, and they've been on a few different podcasts. And I think that the way they capture the theory is just really beautiful and really true, I think, to my experience and to the experiences of a lot of trans women that I know. In fact, I think that like the AGP, it's a label that a lot of people run from. I think because it has been so mischaracterized and stigmatized throughout its life cycle, that people really are not willing to confront their actual sexuality honestly. And I think that's kind of tragic because I think it's in a lot of ways much less scary and much less fetishistic than people will lead you to believe. A lot of the times when you see people who are engaging in like gross fetishism on these like Twitter accounts, it's people who they have AGP, but they also have some other issue going on, right? Like normal fetishists, kinky people do not go out and do this. And it tends to be people who just like don't understand social etiquette or norms or are so like oblivious or uncaring about other people that they are going to like foist their fetish on other people. And I think that's really inappropriate. And so I think that AGP kind of demands an ability to disambiguate between people who just have a alternative sexuality and people who are engaging in that alternative sexuality in a way that is probably not good. So yeah, I think if we want to be honest with ourselves, if we want to come to a better understanding of both transness and the appropriate lines within culture, I think we have to start with an honest conversation that, yeah, a lot of trans women have these sexual impulses, and it's not usually in a way that is going to be grossly destructive.
There's
Right.
also the fact that like cis women can also find themselves attractive when like and get sexually turned on when they're like dressed up sexily and like they know they're attractive, they know like they're extremely sexually desirable, and and like they get turned on by it. Like we will have like cis women talk about like getting turned on by looking at themselves in the mirror. Does that mean that these cis women are also autogynephiles? Like,
Sure. I don't mind calling them that.
I think they might be autosexuals. Yeah. I don't know if, yeah, probably. I don't know if I'd call it like auto heterosexual in the same way that like I'm auto heterosexual, like attracted to the opposite sex within myself. I think they would be like auto homosexual in that case. So it's a little bit different, but it is the same
Okay,
kind of
yeah.
autosexuality.
I think we have to point out real quick that trans Twitter's fucking insane, and no one should be caring about it at all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all of Twitter is
It's full of
insane.
insane, mentally damaged people who can't fucking live a real life, and they're all insane. All right.
it's what happens when you spend all your time on the internet and you never touch grass. You lose in touch with reality. But I should say that though that Blanchard's typology is a bit outdated and a bit inaccurate because like I don't think like trans women could be accurately be split into the two camps so much because like we've mentioned there are like asexual trans women and there are like trans women that just fall entirely out of like the two camps and there's also the typology also doesn't account or even acknowledge the existence of trans men or autoandrophilia, I guess would be the equivalent of it,
Yeah.
like from the trans women's perspective.
I kind
Like
of agree with you, Lilith, but there's some kind of split there. There's something like when we say trans people, I like that's an inaccurate label because it's an umbrella term for different things, and we have to admit that there are definitely different things happening here. So, for example, there's you two, And I know at least some of both of your life experiences, and you both seem to be legitimately trans. However, without naming names, I have a friend who he's like 36 or 37. He's decided I don't consider this person a trans woman. I call him a he. He's decided to transition. And I asked him, I was like, why are you like I mean, if this is who you really are, fine, but like what's going on? And he said, well, my brother just died, and I'm estranged from the rest of my family, and I have nothing else going on, and I'm very lonely, and this helps me cope. And I'm like, okay, fair
Huh.
enough. And also, and I've also liked, masturbating in women's clothing. It's like,
Mm.
okay, I don't think you're trans. He
Right.
still decided he still decided to transition. It seems like his problem though is that he has a shitty life.
Hmm.
You know? I don't think he's actually trans. I think he's just suffering in other ways. And that this is like there's like okay, one of the side effects, one of the bad side effects of normalizing transness, at least some part of our culture normalizing transness, and has been that if you have some sort of depression that might be related to gender stuff or sexual stuff, or it might be a symptom of it, or you might have like multiple things going on with you mentally, and one of them is that suddenly you have like uh, a ready-made treatment plan plopped into your lap. You know what I mean? So now it's like, okay, well, you know what? You're feeling bad about something in your life. Oh, well, you know what? You can socially transition. Here's what you do. Here's a checklist. You gotta wear these clothing. You gotta act like this. Then you can medically transition. Here's the drugs you can take. Like basically, it gives someone a pathway forward that might not be for them, but at least they're doing something. Even though that thing ends up being the completely wrong thing, it's probably very attractive to people who are otherwise lost if they
Yeah.
have something that they think they can do.
And the fact that it's sold as like such an effective thing, I think a lot of people are attracted to it. And then once you get
Mhm.
in, the community can be very, very accepting and very like encouraging. And that's really nice for people, especially people who are feeling a little bit lost. I agree with you, Lilith. I think that the typology is probably not wholly accurate, and it doesn't capture the true breadth of diversity that is within the trans community. There are people, I think, who are transitioning who are not AGP, and also they're not exactly trying to escape homophobia or something.
Yes.
HSTS seems to me very much like a product of the time that that these old writers like Blanchard and Bailey were writing, and is probably not as prescient today. But I also think that you can like have elements of both. Like personally, I think I have elements of both. I feel that my attraction to men is very genuine, and that was a motivating factor in my transition as well. It was like wanting men to like me. And I have like very clear memories of being in high school and like wanting to wear makeup because I wanted the boys in my class to think that I'm pretty. And that was a motivating factor as well. So I think that when we reduce it to like, it is either this or that. And if you are HSTS, you're true trans and valid and whatnot. And if you're AGP, like you're this gross fetishist. I really think that we lose a lot of the richness of human experience that informs everyone's actions.
Exactly. Like everybody is like wholly different, and to reduce like the entire trans experience into two categories is just way
It's
too
tragic.
reductive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then of course now you have people who are like, I'm a woman will God okay, I'm an old man compared to you two. So I'm in my 30s. I went off to university in like 2007 or whatever. And back then, lesbian until graduation was a huge thing, right? It was a
Mm-hmm.
big deal. I have a friend who is legitimately a lesbian who had her heart broken by somebody who dumped her like on the day of graduation. It's like, well, it's time. It's like, oh Jesus Christ, I guess this really does happen. Um, and now it seems like like that fad has passed, and now what's going on is you have women who go off to college. They decide that they are a she,
Non-binary.
they, non-binary trans person because they wear jeans and they have like dyed blue hair, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, come on, come the fuck on. And like you see that so much. I have to think that part of the rapid inflation of the numbers of trans people is just people saying that they're trans when they're really not. They're not.
Yeah, you
I
do
have to
see
think
that
that.
in certain
Yeah.
clinics. There's Jesse Single has like Jesse Single, he has a list like talking about this. And he goes through the data, some of the studies, and also like aggregates data from a lot of different clinics. And you see just these massive spikes in people who are coming in, and they tend to be overwhelmingly female or natal female. So yeah, that would not surprise me because we do have some data to support that.
It's the tomboy genocide. It's actually happening, guys.
Exactly.
They're coming. They're coming for
Thank
your
God
tomboy GFs.
Lauren Southern escaped it just barely.
Fuck.
So, like, I don't know necessarily how much of it is that way, but I can definitely see that there's a large section of people that are like aren't actually trans, but like they want to just escape. Like I'm not saying like most trans men are like this, but there's definitely like a segment of trans men or who are born female at birth who are just like they want to transition or identify as non-binary to escape misogyny. And some do identify out of it later on, and like
But
it's
also
pretty.
to an extent,
It's
that's
yeah.
fine. Like if you
Yeah.
want to dress like a boy and like call yourself whatever you want to call yourself, like frankly, I think you have the freedom to do that, right? Like free
Exactly.
country, do what you want. But also to an extent, there does need to be like some line drawn of like, okay, let's let you do that, but also not necessarily lump you in with the people who have like gender identity disorder, right? And that's kind of where the discourse is for me is yes, freedom, but also let's be careful not to conflate these different things.
No,
I agree
Taftach.
entirely. I don't think
We must
I don't
hatch
think
every
women should
single
be
egg.
stopped.
No, Lilith, hatch all the eggs. Hatch them all. All
Like-
the femboys must be exterminated and turned into trans women. That's how it is.
A genocide. Horrible.
Fuck. But yeah, like, man, maybe this. I think this is just a product of my age. But if you go back, back in the 2000s, you had so many ways to be a gender non-conforming person, and those all seem to be erased now. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like you could be a tomboy, and you're still considered a girl. You could be like a feminine. You could be like a feminine man. You could be a metrosexual or like a. We didn't use the word femboy back then. But Sephiroth popularized long-haired pretty boys in Western media for sure, from Final Fantasy VII. So you could be these different types of man or woman that wasn't strictly masculine or strictly feminine, and you were still considered a man or a woman. Nowadays, it seems like if you're anything but like a masculine man or a feminine woman, you have to be the other gender now.
Mhm.
And now it's like, well, hold on. You've now restricted everything to only just men and women again. But now you just a bunch more trans people in the middle.
Or
It's
man,
like, that's no
woman, and
good.
non-binary. And I think that
Yeah.
like the message kind of is that like no, women have to be a certain way, because if you're a woman who doesn't feel totally feminine all of the time, I don't think that that should force you to not identify as a woman. Obviously it doesn't, but I think that like the message kind of being implied is that like if you don't fully fit in, that means that you're not a woman. And that's probably not the case. I feel like when I talk to detransitioners, that's sometimes what I hear from them is they'll say, yeah, I wasn't totally fitting in. And, I felt bad about it because I was a teenager and teenagers don't fit in. And oftentimes that's related to gender expectations. And then here were all of these people around me, and they were saying things like, well, all of the evidence suggests that if you feel this way, you're going to feel better taking testosterone. And that turns out that, okay, it didn't actually work for them because this is a very serious decision and it can't be something that is made just based off of a minor feeling. It has to be something that is really grounded in a serious, persistent gender issue.
So I don't know if I necessarily agree with the notion that like gender nonconformity is getting erased or getting pushed way too like though if you are gender nonconforming you are trans. Like there are still like tomboys and there are still like there are still like femboys and stuff.
Endangered species.
But like, I do think like some of these people that might have like formerly identified as tomboys in the past, like identify as like non-binary these days because like there's just a term for it now, and they feel more comfortable with the umbrella of with the label non-binary than they are with tomboy, which like you could say it's like a good or bad thing, but like for some people they might think testosterone is the right choice, but there's also plenty of like non-binary people who aren't on hormones either. So I don't think like gender nonconformity has necessarily disappeared, even if like more people who would have formerly identified in certain labels now identify as a different label. It's just the name has changed and the label has taken on a different one rather than them
That's the
disappearing
thing, though.
altogether.
That's the thing, though, because the label has changed. Now you have other people saying, "Okay, so even though you're the same as you would have been, you're called non-binary now, which makes you trans."
Which
And
then
you
kind
see
of
that a
pushes
lot.
you down a specific pathway, specifically a medical pathway, which is probably not
Yeah.
appropriate for a lot of these people.
Yeah, which is why, like, personally, I don't consider non-binary people to be trans people. Like, they're not the same thing. They shouldn't be under the same umbrella. You know.
Mhm.
What about the non-binary people who are medicalized, who do want to like
Well,
And who like
if that's the
actually
case,
benefit from it. Well, I think it's just
and
like
can
that is people
and
who have GID, right? And I think that's the appropriate label. Is people who have GID versus like trans people more broadly, which maybe includes both non-binary people and binary trans people.
it's
well,
why I like the term transsexual. Like, there's some people who think it's like a outdated
too.
term, but like I like the word transsexual, and I call myself a transsexual sometimes because like I do have GID, I do have, and hormones do benefit me, and
yeah, it makes it more
so does
medical, I think.
transitioning fully. And
Wait, Lilith, does that mean that you're taking the Transmedicalist pill?
I don't know if that necessarily makes me transmedicalist, rather than just acknowledging that there is a medical aspect to some people's trans identities. Like, it doesn't mean I don't think
Transmedicalism is
like
based, Lilith.
it doesn't mean well no like
Dispel all the trenders.
transmedicalists don't think like people who aren't on hormones can be necessarily trans, but I completely disagree with that. I don't think you necessarily need to be medicalized in order to be trans if you identify and you want to be a certain way. Like if a
Well,
person just like dresses as a woman and identifies as a woman but is born as a man, but doesn't take hormones, but and yet they still look like a woman, and you know they still like they just don't feel the need to get surgeries and hormones and stuff. That doesn't mean they're not trans. They still obviously identify as one, and they might even have gender identity disorder as well.
see, I don't know about that. I got to think about that one. I don't. That doesn't sound right to me for some reason. My
I will
intuition tells
say,
me no.
Lilith, I used to be much more transmedicalist, and I feel like I've kind of moved away from that because, frankly, I think there needs to be like a distinction made, but I'm not sure the distinction needs to be trans and not trans. Like,
Right.
if we made the distinction trans people who have GID and trans people who don't, I think that's also a valuable way to make the distinction. I just think there needs to be a distinction, and that distinction should be people should try to represent that in medical literature. Like I was talking to Not So Erudite the other night, and one of her big frustrations with trans research is that a lot of times you'll have these big surveys and they don't make a distinction between people who have like dysphoria, people who don't, people who have non-binary, who are non-binary, but just like it is not a medical issue for them. You'll survey all of these people and it makes it really hard to tell what the actual effect sizes are for hormones or for how much people want hormones or whatever, because everyone's just sort of being lumped in. And
I
that is probably a problem.
I completely agree. There is definitely a need for a distinction in when it comes to certain, especially when it comes to like certain study groups, and it's just sometimes it's just not good to lump us all in the same thing, because like a trans person with dysphoria and gender identity disorder, JID, or a transsexual, in other words, like our experiences will be vastly different than someone who is just they feel like they feel a certain way, and they might, worse, the gender fluid, as an example, they might feel male some days, they might feel female some other days. Like, our experience is widely different than someone like that. Doesn't mean they're not trans or they can't be trans, as some transmedicalists would say, but they're not the same. They don't have the same experience, and they don't have like the same needs as us.
So I'm not bought into the whole gender fluid thing. I'm not sure about that one. I don't know. I don't know about that one. I don't know about that one. But I do think that if you're gonna draw a line, it should probably be with gender identity disorder. That should be the line, right? Because you get the HRT femboys who have no dysphoria at all, but they still take it so they can trap better. And it's like, well, okay, you're not trans then.
Yeah, they're not
Mhm.
trans.
Yeah. So it seems like dysphoria should be the line there on what makes you actually trans or not trans, or just pursuing an aesthetic, right?
I think it's a good potential line.
Yeah.
I'm not committed to
Anyway.
any line, but if you're gonna do one, sure, that one's pretty good.
We've been on this email for about 45 minutes.
Yes,
So
that's like
let's read email number 2.
yes.
Hold
Out
on,
of
what do we got?
2,603.
Oh God. Okay, so what's this? Let's see here. The key to the entire bill is the language attempting to change or affirm the child's perception of their sex, with sex defined as the biological state of being female or male. We have to be able to explain the application. So let's say if we have a teenage girl, she perceives she's a boy. A, doctors cannot perform any of the restricted surgical procedures or give restricted meds that affirm her perception of being a boy. B, doctors cannot perform any of the restricted surgical procedures, give meds that change her perception of being a boy. 2, if she perceives she's a girl, doctors cannot perform any of the restricted surgical procedures or give restricted meds that affirm her perception of being a girl. Doctors cannot perform. Okay, so
Okay, what is the
this
parentheses thing? 'Cause it's a little bit cut off on my screen.
yeah, it's cut off here too. It doesn't. It just ends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
This scenario would mean there's a congruity between body and mind. The bill is probably not applicable. Like this just seems to be them like talking about how to word the how to word the bill such that trans kids do not get put on hormones until they're of age, but
right.
cis kids can still get any sort of care related to their biological sex that they need. So it
Right,
seems like they're parsing out how to word the bill here.
right. We've seen a lot of these bills. They try to like make exceptions. So it's like let's say for example, and a person is born intersex, and they can either develop male parts or develop female parts. And a lot of these bills are going to be like, oh, you can't have surgeries, you can't do anything, you can't even go on HRT as be anywhere unless you're over 18. But then they'll make exceptions to be like, oh, but it's okay to perform surgeries and on intersex babies to make them a certain way
Yeah, I've
because
seen a lot of
oh
intersex
yeah
clauses. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I've noticed that too. Because here's the thing. I mean, this is what this is what you would expect to see, right? Because their goal is that they think that people are being pushed onto hormones when they're way too young, and they want to wait. They want people to wait until they're of age. So this is what they would do. You know, this is not necessarily surprising. What else do we got here? Representative Sabatini is sponsoring this bill in the Florida House, and we are trying to compile a list of experts that could advocate in support of the bill. We're trying to compile a list of scientific medical experts. Okay, so they're trying to get people to advocate for the bill. This is all like normal politicking, I think, this stuff.
Yeah, that's my impression too. A lot of it's just like not that surprising to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but whereas they're instead of trying to just find any doctor who might know what they're talking about, they're specifically trying to find doctors that will like affirm their beliefs and their position and be like, oh, we're only going to ask the doctors that agree with us, basically.
Well, sure, but I mean that's kind of the name of the game, right? Like it's up to the opposition to find the opposition doctors.
Yes,
how
but
you.
like politicians usually try to present and like they're being objective. They're just trying to get to the truth when it's just like this just spells it all out for us. Whereas it's like they're not doing that. They're just literally just trying to find like figureheads to prop up their bills.
Well, yeah, but like again, that's what they should do. You know, it's up to the Democrats to come along with their
No,
experts to prop
I
up their side
disagree.
of it.
I
Yeah.
feel like if they're trying to pass a medical bill that's just trying to that will affect many types of people, they should try to find what is objective and true instead of just, oh, here's our conclusion. Now, how can we get to find enough people with qualifications to support our conclusion?
In an ideal world, I think everyone would be just looking for the truth. But I do think that our system is set up to have that kind of tension, right? It's like the prosecutor and the defendant. And the idea is that when you have
Mhm.
these forces pushing against each other, eventually you end up at the truth. Now, how accurate that is, I'm not totally sure. I'm not totally bought on that. There's definitely a lot of political questions that simply cannot be validated to be objectively true or false. And I think it's moral, statements like it is morally good in of itself to have like optimization for freedom, or morally good to optimize for like helping the poorest members of society to create like equity. I don't know if that's something that can be really determined, and that's like a age-old philosophical debate. Like you can bring that up with Hume and he would have opinions on that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
like some things can be objectively figured out. Like objectively, does HRT improve mental health outcomes? There is a theoretical like objective answer to that. Whether that's worth it to
You're
give
cutting out a
people.
bit, Taftach.
Oh,
You're cutting
sorry.
out somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, I
Is it
think
your
it's
noise gate? I guess.
maybe I could put it on push to talk, but yeah, I think that. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think it is your noise gate because you cut out like at the end of your sentences sometimes.
Well, anyways, I think that in an ideal world, we would probably F everyone pursuing objective truth. But unfortunately, we don't exist in that world. And I do think that our political system is set up to encourage people to push on opposite sides. And eventually, the idea is that that will bring us to the truth.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it is. The people who are pro these bills, it is their responsibility to find experts that will testify in favor of them. And people who are anti these bills, it is their responsibility to find experts who will testify against them. And then you have those experts clash it out, and they smash their ideas together, and then eventually you reach at the truth. You hit the truth that way. So I don't think it's necessarily bad that they're looking for people to prop up. The chat says your mic is much better now.
Oh, exciting. I love that.
What'd you
yeah,
do?
Yeah, it's like less of the noises in the background now.
I just
Yeah.
switched to push to talk.
Oh, that's very strange. Push to talk shouldn't cut out your background noise, but I mean, if it works, it works, right?
I'll take it.
Okay, let's see what's next.
I think you might have skipped us one.
What? No, I mean, there's
I
not
don't
much
think
here.
we went through this one. There's
Okay.
consider if you are a mother of a daughter, one day your daughter could decide without your involvement to change her birth certificate. This legal document would now say you gave birth to a son. You have zero say. The document is a lie about your personal life and your health history, is what's happening in case the parents in many. states. So I think this one is they're trying to outlaw a person changing their birth certificate, and it doesn't just say kids, like just like I think they're trying to make it illegal for any one, adults included, to change their birth certificate, which is like you have zero say. Well, yeah, it's not you. You're not the person that's on the birth that the birth certificate is of.
If I was going to steel man this, though, I mean, the person also has zero say, right? Like, you can't really change anything else. You can't change your birthday on your birth certificate because it's the day you were born. There are some things that are immutable, you know. Here's the spiciest take that is actually just normal and correct. Trans women are biologically male, and if you're talking about your biological sex, it seems appropriate to put an M there instead of an F.
Well, yeah, for like medical stuff, but like I don't see how like the birth certificate is like necessary when it comes to that, because like what is the birth certificate gonna do when it comes to like are they gonna medicalize you, or is it like I feel like it's necessary for like a doctor to know it, but like
well, sure, but then why change it at all, right?
no.
Like, would your life be measurably worse if you looked at your birth certificate and it's like in a lockbox in your closet or something? You pull it out and it says an M on it.
No, but like I feel like people should have like the right to say like, oh, I'm not a man. I identify as a woman, and
well, the M is male, not man, right? That's why it's MF and not MW on a birth certificate.
Yeah, well, you identify as.
Well, sure, but I mean, your birth certificate isn't what you identify as. It's what you are, in a biological sense.
I think that
but how relevant is your biological sex outside of medical? Like, why does it have to be like it reflect your biological sex though?
Because it's accurate.
Why though?
Well, because it is.
Shouldn't we aim for accuracy and truth?
Yes. Yeah.
I think here's the debate.
But like,
right?
I wouldn't have a problem if like birth certificate were to say, "Oh, your sex is male, but your identification is something else." Like,
but here's the question: like, why does it need to contain that information? Like, you could just explain to people if they ever saw your birth certificate, or they just look at you and they're like, "Oh, sex male, but clearly identifies differently." I think the reason this kind of gets brought up is because that will transfer into other documents. So, for example, like passport or like driver's license. This used to be like more true. Now I think you can just get your driver's license changed without changing your birth certificate in a lot of states. But people would want that because they don't want to get like pulled over and have the cop be like, "This is clearly not your driver's license because it says M."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for more casual forms of ID that other people have to regularly see, I can see a privacy argument there, right? Where it should say what you look like, not what you were born as, basically. Because there's no reason for the police officer who's pulling you over because you're speeding to know that you're trans.
Mm-hmm. But then here's the other question: is like, does society have an interest in knowing what you were born as, and should that information be kept in some permanent record? I'm not sure society does have a legitimate interest in knowing what your birth sex is. And I think that gets to like Lilith's argument of like, if you want to change it, shouldn't you have that right to change it? Like, do we really need to have this tracked forever and ever? I'm not sure it does. And I think that like, if it's relevant for doctors, to know, then you should explain that to doctors. But like, doctors also don't necessarily need to see your birth certificate to know that. You can just have your medical history for them. So yeah, I don't think it's the biggest thing if people are like wanting to change it. It seems legitimate to me. And at the same time, it doesn't seem like a super pressing issue. Like, again, I never look at my birth certificate. So if it says M, I'm not really concerned about that.
Right. Yeah. And thank you for that, Taftach. That's pretty much the point I'm making. Like, it just doesn't feel like necessary for there to be a measure to prevent the change on the birth certificate because like it's not that relevant for society to know for sure like what
It
you were
seems to me
born
like
as.
private knowledge,
Yeah.
right? And whether
I don't
you
know.
share
I
that
don't
with
know if I
people or
agree with
not.
that.
Okay,
Like
yeah.
I know I'm biologically male, although there's like my doctor said like there's a good chance I have Klinefelters, so it's like I can't find out without an actual test, but like
Mhm.
but sadly those tests aren't covered unless there's a medical need. But like there's a utility for a doctor to know, but like there isn't so much utility for it to reflect on like your driver's license, your day to day when you identify and present in different ways.
I don't know. I think there might be an interest in society knowing how many males and females are being born for some statistical reason or some kind of census reason. I don't think it's a very
Mm,
strong interest though, but I think it does exist.
yeah, maybe. But I also think that could be recorded anonymously. And like we don't necessarily need to track every person's individual history. Like if
hmm
um if hospitals wanted to track that when children are born, that seems pretty legitimate to me. But I don't know if it needs to be like recorded in all time what every person was when they were born. There might be a legitimate reason for that, but I can't think of one.
Right. Right. Okay. Let's see the next. What's next here? Our current language does not require verification from a medical professional that the appropriate chromosomal analysis and evaluation of anatomy has taken place, and that the decision of sex is appropriate based on that analysis. 2. Our language is silent about what happens if they don't resolve the indeterminate status within 3 years. Do we need to specify that it can be resolved in court after this? Do we need to specify any requirements that that should be the case? Uh, is this where we get to like the there's memes going around on left wing Twitter where you have like teachers checking like trans kids' genitals and stuff in gym class, and it's like we got to figure out whether or not you can play in the girls' team, and it's like Jesus,
That's
that's
pretty awful.
yeah,
Like if
yeah
they're
maybe
kids, come on.
yeah.
Yeah. General inspection day is a meme, all right?
Or like
You're
it
not
should
supposed
coming
be.
to
back.
actually.
Genital inspection day is coming back, guys. Everyone pull out your dicks. That's what's gonna happen. Fuck. I remember I almost got Sitch on the Adam and Sitch show to believe that penis inspection day was a real thing. I almost got him to believe it. He hadn't heard the meme before, and I got him so close to believing it.
That's amazing.
Mm. But yeah. This sounds like okay. Well, you have to do chromosomal analysis, and you got to see your kid naked. It sounds this is very strange. This is very strange. You're talking about these, including these in the bill. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Let's see. What is this? Okay, I'm gonna read this because it's kind of this is like a schizo post in the
Gee
email.
whiz.
Okay, yeah. Gee whiz, humans are the only living species of Homo sapiens. Given that fact, we are male and female. There is no other. We are mammals, giving birth, carrying an XX or an XY, female or male. Otherwise, a bizarre abnormality results in a state of disease. Turner syndrome, Klinefelter syndrome, etc. Everybody is transgender. Nobody is transsexual. Cisgender is true for everyone. Try not to use the nomenclature of non-science. Non-binary, Disneyland comes to science. You are non-binary, then what? A worm, a worker bee, a penguin in a European zoo, an ant? I am zero. Listen, talk to
Jesus.
me. Talk to me. Be real. Stop. No, you meant to say that you are claiming something that does not exist except in your mind. Got it? Your mind, take a look, please. See, right. You are a male or female, so stop with the rigmarole and talk to me now. Throw out words or phrases that have shifting definitions, political realms, identities unscientific, and whims and notions that are never studied in science. Never. I feel better. So this guy, he just had some kind of compulsion. He's like at the end, he's like, oh, I feel good now. I just had to get all the schizo-posting out.
I don't even know what he's getting at.
Fucking hell, man. Are we reading Dr. Seuss?
Or Terry A. Davis?
Wait,
It's just like the CIA glowies.
I love how it's just like fitted in between like law talk. And they're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, he's this person acting wild.
There's more schizo-posts, guys. Looks great. My only concern is with the quote. Wait, is this schizo-post? I don't know. Okay, hold on.
I think this.
My only concern is with the quote from Segum. Will, would you consider this? First, the reference cisgender identifying individuals. I believe there is a way to make this point without using a word like cis, which indirectly endorses the ideology upon which transgender identities are based. Now, the suggestion with the quote is to add non-binary. Even though transgender has become an umbrella term for covering both, some non-binary individuals do not say they're transgender. Many forums offer both categories for people to check when they identify themselves. Okay, this is just like another word conversation. Okay. Yeah, a lot of this stuff just seems to be like them hashing out the details of how these bills should look. You know, kind of normal political coordination. Is there anything spicy? I want to see the spice. Let's see. I think this is more of that, you know. The literature finds a compelling interest in maintaining accurate quantitative biology-based statistics on how certificates of birth, which provide vital statistics fundamental to the performance of government functions that secure public health and safety, identifying public health trends, assessing risks, conducting criminal investigations, helping individuals determine their biological lineage, citizenship, or susceptibility to genetic disorders. So I guess that's like that's like the argument for keeping the M or the F on your birth certificate, I guess. They listed off like a bunch of reasons, and it's like, well, I mean, maybe those are kind of like weak reasons. You could do them in other places, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like hospitals can individually list like for example, if you're like a trans woman, they would list you as like a MTF like male or something.
Hold on,
like
isn't
that.
MTF considered bigoted now?
Is it?
No,
not
really.
Isn't it now AMAB instead of MTF?
Not really.
think people
AMAP
still use
could apply
MTF.
to cis males too.
Well, I've been told that MTF is bigoted by some idiots on Twitter.
AMAP,
So.
transsexual. Yeah, I don't know. I think that in regards to, like public health, the other like side of this is that having a track of someone changing their birth certificate probably implies or gives you like more public health info, right? So like if someone applies for this change and then it changes, well then you actually have like a sense of here are people who are changing their sex, and we can also account for that. Like trans women who are on estrogen are going to perform differently than people who have testosterone in their system for matters of public health. An example of this would be COVID. We know that COVID affected men more than women, and that was linked to estrogen, which kind of implies that trans women might be more in the woman category for this specific health issue. And in that case, you might actually want that information. Now, again, I don't think that birth certificates are the best way to track this, but
yeah, it seems like a non-issue either way.
Yeah, that's kind of my impression.
Yep. Jesus, hold on. In case it's not on the radar, the same folks arguing for chemical castration in children for the purpose of gender confirmation are usually against the same thing being used on sex offenders. The treatments are one and the same. I don't think that's true. Like, are sex offenders chemically castrated using like HRT?
I think they do have to take like testosterone blockers. Like I think that sex offenders will sometimes take Sparrow.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't
I could
necessarily.
be wrong, so call me out if I am, but
And I don't necessarily think like people who think like trans people should be able to go on like HRT are also thinking, oh, we shouldn't do this for sex offenders. I think there's plenty of people like who are just okay with like doing both. Like, why not? Because like if these sex offenders are a danger, then maybe they should have maybe there should be something done to decrease their chances of reoffending.
Okay.
Well,
yeah,
what we could do is
like
just physically castrate them instead of chemically castrate them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just actually cut it off. There you go.
It does
Solved.
look like they use the same drugs in some cases.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Mm.
Specifically Lupron. That's what I took when I was a teenager. So
That's like an optics L, I guess, but it's not that big of a deal.
yeah, I don't think it's
As-
that big of a deal either.
Yeah, that difference is going to be like, well, you know, people who are transitioning generally aren't sex offenders, and they're doing it for different reasons. So that's like, okay, I get
But
the
it's
point. But
just
it's
a
just an
non
optics.
sequitur.
Yeah.
Like,
In the case of something like cancer, sterilization is a side effect rather than a goal of a treatment. There's no directive that children with cancer must be sterilized, and if doctors could prevent that outcome, surely they would.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, but like HRT doesn't always result in like sterilization.
And that's
either.
also
There's-
not the goal of HRT.
It's also it's also
Yeah.
not the goal. Like
I assume
plenty
that
of
I assume that if you could go on HRT and still be fertile, most people would do that. Just they
in
can have
fact,
their own kids later. Yeah.
in fact, the goal of in like sterilization, like there are some countries that are like pretty bad on trans rights, whereas just like if you're trans and you want to go through treatment, you are actually required to get like medically sterilized. Like places in Japan, there's like a requirement for sterilization before you get like the
Yeah.
recognition. So it's like
I'm not sure that that's a good idea, to be honest.
yeah, it usually doesn't come from the pro trans side, like with for sterilization as a goal. Like normally, you're fighting against that if you're pro trans.
See. Yeah. So this is them having an optics conversation, right? We should also point out that these procedures amount to involuntary sterilization of minors. They cannot legally or psychologically consent. Their parents cannot give informed consent, since the knowledge necessary for informed consent does not exist. There's probably a point there, actually, because you wouldn't, if a 14-year-old comes up to you and says, "I'm not trans, I just want to get myself sterilized. I don't want kids in the future." Pretty much every doctor would say, "Come back when you're older." They would say that. They'd say, "Come back when you're 30 or whatever. Come back when you're older, when you're established, and now you realize, oh, you actually don't want children." You hear that? That's pretty common. That they're not at least till you're 18. Probably a lot of doctors will probably just tell you to wait even longer for sterilization specifically. So there's probably, I don't know how to square this away, but there probably is a point that you have young people who are going on hormones, and we wouldn't let them sterilize themselves if they were cis. So why do we let them sterilize themselves when they're trans?
But
I think it's because sterilization is not the goal.
Yes,
again.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, sterilization is not the goal, but nonetheless, it's still happening.
Yeah, and I think this brings up like an interesting, an interesting like eugenics situation where if there is mass sterilization of people who are trans, let's say that being trans is partially informed by genetics, well, we can expect future generations to probably be less trans than they are now. Eventually, those genetic influences will be mitigated in the gene pool. And so I've actually had this like brought up to me by certain right wingers who are very much like on the eugenics train. And they're like, yeah, some people in my community will argue that like actually the trans movement is good because it's basically this very pro eugenic movement that is removing all of these people who we think are degenerate and have all of these issues. At the same time, they'll bring up like IQ studies on trans women. And they're like, well, but there seem to be like some indications that trans women are like unusually high IQ, specifically AGP trans women. And so maybe it's not good if they're sterilized. It's this whole debate, which I think is kind of interesting and a totally different way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm. The same thing with gay men. Gay men tend to have higher IQs as well. There's, I heard Milo.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. I heard Milo describe it, and Milo being Milo, he has his issues, but I think he was correct when he said this. Milo described it as that males are nature's playground because they're a bit more reproductively expendable. Nature can afford to like tinker a little bit more, so there's more variation in males than there are in females.
Also because of the specific way that the X and Y chromosomes work, if there's like a change on the X chromosome in a woman, and it's just one of them, like she still has her other copy, and so the body can actually like figure out what should be happening based on that. If there's a change on the Y chromosome, that can have a much more immediate effect. And so you do see a lot of diversity and, quote unquote, like faster new mutations among the male population. I think there's like a sex researcher who was just talking about this, who I was listening to.
Yeah, like you see, like all the dumbest people tend to be males. All the smartest people tend to be males. All the least and most aggressive people tend to be males. All the least and most successful people in almost any domain tend to be males. It's just there's something there. We're like women are like comfortably consistent. Men are like all over the map.
Hair variation.
In general, yeah. Going very general here, very general. Okay, is this? Okay. There's a lot. Okay, hold on. Let's keep going. What's this? What's this one say? No doctor or parent has a right to subject a child to a life-altering medical experiment with unknown long-term consequences. Without this ban in place, SD, what is SD? Oh, South Dakota will follow what is already happening in other states. Minors who successfully sue in court to obtain this supposedly life-saving medical intervention. And when they grow up with irreversible regret, who will be liable? The state. That's probably a decent point.
Except the long-term
Liability
consequences are not unknown, though. We've
Wow.
had these, like, we've had these procedures done for like decades and decades, and there have been plenty of studies showing the effects of it. It's not a medical experiment. Like if
I
it
don't know
would
if
be a
that's
medical experiment if
true.
it's something like
I don't know if that's
They
true
have
either.
been
We're
done
not
for decades,
familiar
but
with.
like the studies that are longitudinal and are following people over decades, those I don't know if there are any of them. Like I've seen them up to like 3 years.
I think I've seen 5. I think I saw
Okay,
one that did
5.
5.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
it. Yeah.
So like there's lots of studies for people in the first year, but
Yeah,
and those are
I've
not the
seen
best
like
studies, frankly. But like the longer
I,
studies are even more scarce.
I've seen
Hmm.
like studies that go up to like 10 or even
Really?
longer, but like
Have you?
they just haven't. I think the problem with some of these studies is like some of these people they just stop
Yeah,
reporting
people drop
in
out
after.
quick.
Yeah. They're like, well, my life's going good now. I don't care anymore. They stop. Yeah.
Yeah, or
Or
they
if their
move.
life isn't
They
going
move.
good and they
Yeah.
detransition or something, they're out of the study because they're no longer
Yeah.
attending the clinic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, or that they move. The medical studies are no longer able to contact them. There needs to be some more comprehensive, but we have a pretty good idea about what's going on and what occurs.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of disagree with that too. I don't know. We have like a good idea, but I will say to your point, Lilith, this is not how like medicine works. Like it's very common for doctors to make choices with patients that are individualized to their specific medical issue without necessarily knowing the long-term consequence. We in this country, we empower doctors to have that dialogue with their patients and to make sometimes tough medical decisions that are not like we don't have perfect info, and we expect doctors to make the best decisions under difficult circumstances. And that is the argument with trans healthcare, is that listen, we don't have all of the info, but we think that doctors in general will make the best decision they can. And I think that there is an issue. I think that we have this kind of cultural movement that prevents doctors sometimes from making the best decision. And there's a lot of pressure not for people not to put up roadblocks, for people to just get young people on hormones. That's not true everywhere, but where it is true, I think that's dangerous. So in theory, I think that is probably appropriate for doctors to sometimes make difficult decisions based on limited info. But this might be a special case where some of that decision-making apparatus has flaws.
Well, in terms of this quote, this person is saying that minors who sue in court later in life because they regret, and the state's going to be held liable, that there's probably a reasonable a reasonable concern there, because the state, if you're an elected representative and you're like, hey, listen, I'm opening up the state to a bunch of liability here, that's probably a reasonable legal concern. And yeah, like there does seem to be. I know this is the spotlight effect, so I'm not pinning everything on this. But you can log on Twitter every single day and see a new person who's had their boobs cut off and they now regret it, and they're like, "How come I was pushed into this when I was like 15 or 16?" And those are tragic stories. And I think as long as those stories keep going viral, and if the actual trend of that happening to people continues, you probably are going to see some legal blowback, and it's not going to be pretty.
The problem with these
Yeah.
stories is that the people who are happy with it usually don't get brought into the spotlight because they're just living their life and they're not like
Yep.
making a
Mhm.
big deal of
Well,
it.
I mean, on Twitter and social media, you do see massive spotlighting for like the most successful transitions all the time. I think
That's true too.
the
Blair White,
problem, yeah, the Blair White, other people, you'll see like trans accounts get like 100K likes on something that is like ratioing a transphobe by like posting their successful transition. I think the problem though is that like these things are politicized. So like one camp is only seeing one and the other camp is only seeing the other. And so when right wingers are like the only ones reporting on detransitioners and they're not reporting on a lot of the successful cases, that creates a distortion. Just like when left wingers are not paying attention to detransitioners at all. So you have both of these going on, but in different communities. And then everyone's just talking past each other because we're no longer existing in the same reality.
Mhm. That's like a larger conversation, but that is a big problem. Is that people? This is the Metal Gear Solid 2 ending. If you guys played that
Which
game,
is so based. That ending is incredible.
where everyone just kind of lives in their own echo chamber and only consumes the media they want to consume, and and then reality is like wildly different in their minds than.
That's
There's
sadly
actually
the case with just pretty much everybody of all aisles. Like there was that study done where it's just like how many what do you think is the percentage of minorities that exist? And people were coming up like with wild numbers, like especially from the right, was just like
oh yeah, I saw that.
just like wildly different. Like some people were going as far as like I think a third of the population is trans, and it was just like,
Oh,
dude,
okay. Did you see the Joe Rogan clip with Matt Walsh where he's like millions of trans kids? It's like, are you
Yeah.
fucking serious, dude?
He's off by
and,
like a factor of 1,000.
I
and
saw
then
something
like
equivalent from
Jamie
the
pulled
left
it
though
up, and
too.
it's like, is that true, Jamie? Pull it up, and Jamie was like, actually, there was only been like a
Couple
few, like
thousand.
less than 1,000 or something.
Yeah. Fuck, it was so funny.
I
There
forgot what it
was
was like. It was like either like slightly a little less than 1,000 or a couple thousand. But yeah.
yeah, and then there was something equivalent on the left that happened too, where I forget the story, but it was some high-profile left-wing figure who said something that was completely off base, and it was ridiculously wrong. It was I can't remember the story, but it was about statistics, and they just had the completely wrong number in their head because they just swim in their ideology, you know. What's the mold bug comparison? Is the water. Ideology is the water in the fish tank, and you swim through it, and you don't even know it's there.
I'd believe it if he said that.
That sounds like a mold buggian thing to say
Yeah.
for sure.
A bit of Moldbug and David Foster Wallace.
I don't know who that one is.
He's got this like great speech that he gives. And he talks about like, this is water, I think is the name of the speech. And he starts it with like an allegory of like fish swimming, and they're greeted by an older fish who says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And they pass each other, and then the two fish turn to each other and they say, "What the fuck is water?" Right? Because they don't actually understand it. And so it gets referenced a lot.
Yeah. Right. Do you know who James Burnham is?
Of course.
Of course. You are the resident internet's neo-reactionary.
Exactly.
So of course you know who. God. Oh man, the funniest bit of last night's stream was when Counterpoints called you
A
called you
progressive.
progressive. I got the perfect screen capped of
You
just
did.
your face. You were so angry.
I look so offended.
Okay, but I've been trying to I haven't read much Burnham. That's like on the list of things upcoming. but I do know that he had an idea that's I think it's the tyranny of red tape. That sound familiar?
I don't know if I'm familiar with this one.
I was trying to explain it to Not So Erudite. We talk a lot in DMs, just don't talk much on stream. But her and I, she doesn't. God, this sounds offensive. It's not. This is not a negative thing. She doesn't seem to know much about political philosophy. Her camp is like strictly psychology, right? And she's very good at psych, but like political philosophy seems to be a bit outside of her wheelhouse. So I've just been telling her some things. She's been asking me some questions. I've been kind of answering them. One thing we talked about was the tyranny of red tape, where the idea basically is the modern bureaucratic state has so many laws that you're constantly breaking some law all the time. And so the prosecution ends up just becoming a political tool, like a power tool, because anyone can be arrested at any time for almost anything. So it just comes down to, does the state want to arrest you or not?
Right. I've also heard of this like being a problem in China, where like if the state wants to get you on something, they will find something because there's so many laws and most of them are like unenforced a lot of the time. But
Yes.
they can be enforced, by political will.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You hear in the West sometimes, oh, you break a dozen laws walking down to the store. You don't even know it, right? That's like a common sentiment. And so there's probably something to it. I don't know quite how I feel about it just yet, but I was just explaining the idea to her. That's as much as Burnham was the managerial revolution guy.
Yeah, which is
I don't
the one that I have not read. I've read Defenders of Democracy, I think, is his big book on like elite theory and stuff. That's what I've read of him.
Yeah. You're a big elite theorist?
I think it's interesting. Yeah, I think I don't know. I do think that I tend to come down on the side of thinking elite theory is correct. I had a discussion with Sitch about this. There might be some nuance, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm just thinking like Adam in the background just reeing because he hates elite theories.
Yeah. That was no, he was there too, and we were definitely debating a lot.
Yeah, I'm like I've definitely settled into like a golden mean position on almost everything, where it's like there's probably something to elite theory, but it's probably not the ironclad thing where everyone thinks. There's something to everything. Everyone's right at least once in a while. So, which is the ultimate fence-sitting cuck position on everything. So I'm happy to inhabit it.
You're just like, you know what, we need balance. You're that guy in like whatever meeting you're in who just says that. Everyone agrees.
Yeah. And then of course I get lambasted as the guy who only wants to kill half the Jews instead of all the Jews, right? That fucking comic. Okay, what's the next one? Let's see here real quick. Was there anything else that's interesting? The Girl Act. That's an interesting name for the piece of legislation. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything else that's like really interesting in here. Medical records? What? Medical records? Here's the medical records. I've been very careful with the VA to always use secure messaging for almost all discussions, so there would always be medical evidence. What is this? Okay, yeah, this is someone who's using like a religious motivation for their activism. Which, I mean, everyone has their like underlying motivations, so I'm not surprised. Like there's what was this one? Hold on. Good stuff, Emily. Kudos for all the work to bring this to life and implementation. A few things that come to mind while reading this. Please consider adding something like these talking points from this article about how to talk to your children. When your 6-year-old comes home from school with a new word, transgender, what do you tell her? Here's a suggestion, something that you should tell your teenager as well. And then there's some link. Transgender talking points for kids. Gender identity definition. Let's see. Medical transition refers to the use of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. Oh, yeah, they want to say to assume the physical appearance of the opposite sex. They want to change it to imitate instead of assume. Yeah, it's all just like optics conversations,
I think there was an interesting email that we could probably talk about. It was about like
Which one is it?
Someone commented that you will never be one of the good ones. I'm trying to find it.
Oh
right now.
yes, I think I've seen that too. Wait, LMAO, they can't find any token detransitioners to use for their cause. I mean, you can find them online everywhere. They're all over the place right now, dude. What are you talking about?
I think they were talking about interstate for their.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
I
It's like
linked the one in the chat.
Right. Okay. Let's see it.
So I feel called out.
You will never be one of the good ones. Okay. Let's see. Dr. Cretella. I'm going to respectively disagree with that, and I'll explain why. I was recruited heavily by the Transsexual Global Alliance. Is that a real group? And I've largely ignored them. There's no shortage of transsexuals willing to denounce the medicalization of children, but their endorsements come with a hitch. They expect everyone to play make-believe that they really are the opposite sex and have compelled pronouns and all that garbage. Even worse, they pitch themselves as the real deal, the true transsexuals that had to transition. People like me, they claim have sexual sexual paraphilias and fetishes, while they were born in the wrong body. So I encourage all of you to not buy into this Trojan Horse ploy, because the actions of these folks identifying as the opposite sex is contributing immensely to the harm being done to females. It's part of our fight, in fact. Walt Heyer is proof that no matter how far you've gone medically, you can still turn back. So unless they've taken formal steps to reclaim their birth sex and denounce gender ideology, please don't endorse or indulge these persons, or contribute to the Blair White types profiteering from this type of behavior. This is the blanket rejection of all trans people, regardless of their politics, regardless of how they feel about the trans kids conversation. Just all of this is the, who was it that went on, was it C-SPAN or whatever, and said all the trannies gotta go?
I think it was Michael Knowles.
Yeah, Michael
Yeah.
Knowles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think this is
his position.
It's
Yeah.
not the C-SPAN. I think it was the CPAC. But
Oh,
yeah,
is
well,
the Canadian version?
No, I think we have C-SPAN, right?
but
Oh no, you do. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I think this is a really
Mhm.
interesting email and response to it, because I get this all the time, right? And I feel very much like this is prescient for me, where I'm kind of navigating this, this strange limbo between positions. And I wonder if Lilith also has that kind of experience, or what her insight is on this.
Lilith is a full commie now, so she doesn't get it anymore.
Fuck off. So, like, they expect everyone to believe that they really are the opposite sex. Like, but first of all, like, I don't think even, like, trans people who don't fall into this category, they don't even think, like, you and I, like, don't think we're actually, like, biologically female. Like, even we acknowledge that we are born with male parts, but gender and biological sex are different, and we have no delusions about what our biological sex is. Like, we don't go to a doctor and be like, oh, can you go check my cervix, please? Put me on that chair and split my legs open and just jam your medical instruments into my big floppy vagina.
Jesus Christ, Lilith.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that,
but, like, it's just like,
to an extent,
from
trans people are painfully aware of what their actual sex is. That is
Yeah.
kind of what dysphoria is. At the same time, I go a step further, and that's like, I take the kind of Thomas Bogardus route, which is, I don't think that there is a coherent definition of woman that includes all trans women, or perfectly like excludes all AFAB people who might be masculine. And so I tend to say that, like, I don't think it should matter at the end of the day. Like, if trans women are men, so be it. And I think men have the right to do with their bodies what they will, and to wear dresses and to wear makeup if they want. I'm kind of libertarian in this sense. And I think I am really different from the conservative ilk that is currently gaining ascendancy, in that I think there does need to be that respect for freedom and for the right of men to do what they will. And I think there's this really scary sense of people trying to clamp down on that freedom. And so I made a
Yeah.
tweet about this
Yeah.
earlier about like how this is why I don't want to align myself with people who are really extreme or on the right wing of this issue, because I know where that road leads, and it's ultimately not one that I'm comfortable with.
I think
I'm
I
on a
agree with you there.
similar
Yeah.
boat where it's like I don't really care if people want to call me a man. Like it's not going to have an effect on my day to day. Where it's just like where I'm still going to transition. I'm still going to take hormones. I'm still going to appear and present in certain ways. And there's just like it's completely irrelevant. If I'm a man, then okay, I don't care.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about, right? Because I've also gone down the Thomas Bogardus rabbit hole. He seems to be a really smart guy.
Definitely.
He knows what's going on, I think. And I'm just like, I've seen like the trans women are women slogan just seems to be a loser in some sense, right? But
Yeah.
but I mean, they're also like trans women also aren't men, obviously either. They're not men. So it seems like trans women are trans women. They're a different thing.
I
And
have thought about
and
that too, yeah.
yeah, so because and the way that I've thought about it is like, okay, well, when you classify various classes of things into a meta class, you do it because they have some similarity, right? So what is it that trans women and cis women have that are similar? Sorry, hold on. You classify things into a meta class because the various classes that it umbrellas, there is something in common. They have one quality that is the same. At least one. They have other qualities that are different, but they have at least one quality that's the same. That makes the classification, the meta class, justified, right? So I think the argument we talked about earlier was like gender nonconforming people and non-binary people and genderqueer people and gender fluid people all being considered trans. Well, what justifies that umbrella? The umbrella seems to be some level of gender nonconformity, whatever it is, right? So if trans women are women, that means that women is a meta class, and trans women and cis women are classes within the meta class. What quality do those two classes have that is the same, that justifies them being part of the same meta class? And I was thinking about it, and I couldn't really find one. No offense.
Well, I think the problem is you can't find like a universal one that includes all trans women, but you can
Mhm.
include different ones that include different kinds of trans women. So, like the meta class of people who dress femininely or wear makeup, right? That's going to include a lot of trans women and cis women,
Or
and
even
that's like a
have,
presentation
or even
class.
just like have like a similar makeup, like brain wise to a
Sure,
cis
Oh,
gray
woman.
matter.
yes, yes. This is like the
Or
woman's brain
hormones.
in a man's body kind of conversation, right? Yeah,
There's like different classifications and different categories that
yeah.
trans women and cis women would share.
The issue ultimately is that that's going to necessarily exclude some cis women who should be considered women, and it's also going to include some people who don't want to be women, right? So, for example, you can have like a very tomboy woman who does not dress femininely at
Right.
all
Yeah.
and
Or really
adopts
push
no
on it.
feminine social role, and now they're not women anymore, right? Because because now they've been kind of selected out of the meta class of woman.
Yeah, or like an immigrant woman who just has a very different approach to femininity than people in the culture she's immigrating to. Like she might not wear makeup, but she might be very similar to the women of her home country. Now, she's not presenting femininity in the way that other women are in the culture she's now in, but that doesn't make her not a woman. Not certainly not in the biological sense, and not truly in like a cultural sense, because she might occupy like a subculture where that is the way that women act, and that is like feminine presentation. So there's
Yeah.
definitely layers to that, and that's an example that Thomas Bogardus gives in his paper, which really struck me because I never thought about that. How really culture plays a role in this too. But yeah, my sense is that
Well, actually, I have a question to you
yeah,
about the culture thing
yeah,
then. So, if you lived in a culture where everything that we consider and hold on, everything that you personally consider to be feminine, all the things that you've adopted to transition, that was considered masculine,
Mhm.
and it was just an entire culture of femboys, would you still have transitioned and become what that culture views as woman?
I mean, I don't think so. Not in the case you laid out. I think that I would be presenting pretty masculine in that culture, right?
Yeah. So then now you're getting into like the gender roles actually are socially constructed. But then
Well, to be
that
clear,
implies
presentation I think is socially constructed.
yeah, so
right?
yeah. But that implies that you could have a culture set up in such a way that you would not actually have any kind of transness possible in it because of
think
the way
so.
that the gender roles are structured.
Yeah, for example, imagine like a culture far into the future where, biological realities are only like a very small part of your existence. Where, for example, we exist as like beings in a metaverse and people are presenting themselves just like their profile pictures. Like you're a cartoon and Lilith is like a cat person and I'm like a painting, right? Well, how do you
Right.
like create genders for that? Suddenly it becomes much more complicated. And so I do think that like culture plays a role. And the problem here is that like people will say gender is socially constructed. I don't think that's true, but I think that like the reason why that's not true is because gender can mean so many different things. Like dress, style of clothing, that is a cultural thing, right? But
Mhm.
how people act personality wise, that is informed by biology. And people might develop cultures around how people act. So that is kind of a mixture of both biology and culture and can vary, but is going to have certain tendencies across cultures. So part of the problem here is I think people are using gender to mean so many different things. None of the definitions of gender,
Dear gender,
yeah,
Taftach, it's real. It's a
dear
real.
gender, I don't think any of them are objectively correct, but they're all just describing different concepts.
So when I was thinking of the meta class thing, I was kind of going through the obvious selections in my head, right? Because it can't be biology because there's a difference between trans women and cis women in terms of biology. It's not social role because trans women don't owe you femininity,
Mhm.
So like it's not aesthetics because for the same reason it doesn't cover everyone. It's not like it's not even necessarily. I know Lilith, you brought up like brain structure, but it's not even necessarily that because I mean, trans women they experience dysphoria and cis women don't. There's at least some difference there. So
Well, if you
it
put a
seems,
cis woman's brain in like a male body, they would experience dysphoria, though.
but they're not in a male's body, and that's kind of the point, right? Is that
Well, I'm
there is
saying
still
this as
there's
like
still
a
a difference.
hypothetical. Like if there was such a thing where it's just like perfect brain transplants, where you just transfer a person's consciousness into a different like body, they probably would experience gender dysphoria.
They would, yes, I completely agree with you. But it's the experience of gender dysphoria that makes it different.
Mm.
So
Well, yeah, we would be experiencing gender dysphoria because we are
right.
in them.
Right. So
The
like
body, yeah.
if I took your brain and put it into a cis woman's body, you wouldn't experience gender dysphoria anymore. But that would
No,
also make you different on
yeah.
some level too. You would now be a slightly different person. So it's that difference that means that trans women and cis women are still different, even by that standard, right?
Well, yeah.
Y-
Well,
y- y-
not
Yeah.
contesting that trans women and cis women have differences.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that there doesn't seem to be any meaningful overlap between the classes of trans women and cis women as classes that justifies them being part of the same meta class.
I feel like there's enough but even if the
I don't think
classification
there is.
doesn't overlap completely all the time, because like if you want to define a woman as like someone who can give birth, or then you would necessarily exclude cis women who cannot give birth. If you want to define it as
See,
like
I'll actually bite that bullet
a
right now. I
woman
don't
with a
care. I'll
person
bite the
with
bullet. I'll say
XX
that.
chromosomes, you would necessarily exclude women who don't have that. Like,
Mhm.
or
I understand, but I'm actually willing to bite that bullet. You know, if a woman comes up to me and says, "Listen, I have a horrible deformity, and from birth I've just had no uterus," I'd be like, "Well, I mean, you're not really a woman then." I'll bite the bullet there. And in fact, they'll even they will tell you. They say like, "I don't feel like a woman in the same way that other women do. They'll even say that. That'll be their own self-reported experience of not being a woman, is because they can't reproduce, they don't feel like they are. So I think that's probably true.
What do you
I don't
say,
think
Dev?
that
That a
necessarily agree
camera
with that.
missing its battery is no longer a camera?
No,
It can no longer take
I
pictures, which is
mean,
ostensibly the telos of a camera. But
yeah.
I would still say it's a camera. And I think that a similar argument applies to women who are deformed through birth or disease or old age and are no longer able to have children. I still think that there's an argument to be made that they are a woman because if not for this small, aberration from how they would otherwise be, they would be able to have children. And I think it's similar to the camera in this sense.
Okay. What if you had a camera and then you removed its light sensor? Is it still a camera then?
I think so. I think it's just a broken camera or a damaged camera.
Okay. First of all, you may not want to call these women broken women. That
Yeah.
might not go over well.
I mean,
but
just
I get your
a
point. I get
woman
your
who's
point. I get your
suffering
point.
from disease or some issue.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why, despite people on the left not liking it, the adult human female definition works very well. It's not just the fact that it's short and snappy and it relies on some semblance of science. It's that it just seems to be like tautologically true in almost all cases, right?
Mhm.
I don't know. It's just that I
But
get your
then you
point.
would have to call someone
have to
like
think about it a bit more.
Angel a woman and include them in.
Well, that's the thing. I don't though. I don't. I would call them a trans man. Because
But
here's
would
the
you
thing.
say a trans man is a type of woman?
I'm not sure. I
Okay.
don't even think I would say that. I don't think so. Because if you do the meta class conversation with let's say trans men and cis women, run the same variables, I'm not sure you can find qualities they share either to make trans men women. So I do think that trans people are probably their own class separate from men or women.
I mean, you could just default to gametes, right? And that would be a way to find similarity. I guess the question is, if we already have a term, which is female and male, and female and male refer to sex distinctions, then I think it makes sense maybe for woman and man to refer to something that isn't purely sex distinctions, if for no reason other than the fact that we already have a word and we're trying to make language useful. So we should try to capture something different and unique. Or it's not a bad thing at the very least to capture some slightly different group.
I mean, sure. I don't disagree with you at all. It's just that I can see. Hold on. For me personally, if we're just talking about my views on this, I still think that trans women are women, but I think that necessarily excludes people who are trenders, right? But if we're talking about something that will satisfy progressives, this is an impossible conversation. That's kind of what I'm getting at here, is that no matter what definition of woman that you have that includes some trans women, it will exclude others. It has to. It just has to, because you're gonna end up with cases. Okay, well, you get Blair White, who's very feminine. That's clearly a woman. Okay, but then why is that a woman? Oh, well, because of the social role that Blair White inhabits. Well, now you're going down the path of, if you're a trans woman who doesn't inhabit a woman's social role, you're not actually a woman, and that's going to get some people mad.
Yeah.
I'm all for getting people mad, but I guess I'm coming at this conversation from the point of view of trying to satisfy the progressives' desires when they're crafting language like this, and they seem like they have desires that cannot be fulfilled. That's what I'm really getting at.
I think so.
In terms of actually speaking to reality, there's a number of legitimate paths we can go down, I think.
I feel like for the day-to-day, though, classifying trans women as women just only makes sense because, you take a look at someone this is the arguments of convenience, but you take a look at someone like Blair White, and then you be like, oh, I want the attention of that man over there, and people aren't gonna have any idea what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah. This I think when Blair White talked to Ben Shapiro, they had this argument where the idea is if they're both going to a restaurant and Blair gets there early and Ben Shapiro has to be led to the seat at the restaurant, he'll point her out by saying that woman over there.
Which
And
is
that's
a
and
killer argument for sure.
yeah, and his use of that language in a casual setting shows that regardless of how he feels politically, he's going to default to this in terms of just everyday language.
Right.
And of course, that doesn't mean like there isn't utility for sometimes referring like calling attention to someone's biological sex, like from a medical standpoint, that only makes
Of
sense.
course.
But for like a social standpoint, it's just like there's no real reason to call to call like a Blair White a man unless you're just ideologically captured or making a political statement.
Are you getting
And
tired,
oftentimes it
Taftach?
could be like
I
to
woke up
detriment.
tired.
Okay.
Same.
Yeah. See, look, no, I completely agree with you. It's just that, like for example, none of this is going to inform how I treat trans women that I know personally, right? Because it's still rude.
Yeah.
It's like even if you think that a trans woman is a man, it's still rude to be like he or to like treat them like shit. Like you can be mature about this, you know? Like there's two different conversations happening, I think, and they're getting overlapped because it's easy to overlap them. Like how you should treat people versus, you know, what the actual like truth is, independent of any one human's perception.
But of course,
Two
like you
different
said, the
conversations.
argument of from convenience definitely does exclude like a trans woman who might identify as a woman but has made who but would be still in a closet publicly and isn't on hormones and or they might be on hormones secretly but they're not presenting themselves in certain ways. But
Yeah.
like I just think like it's usually a case by case basis. Sometimes the biological sex is very relevant, but oftentimes it also isn't.
Yep. Yeah, I think I agree. Was there any more? Hold on. What's this one? Right. Hold on. Here are my thoughts on how you should go about attacking gender identity. The foundation of the thing is built upon a sexual paraphilia, a transvestic disorder that's been gradually cleansed. So I attack two avenues in my sex change petition: legal fiction and the sexual paraphilia. And then, of course, it goes into AGP. All right, this is Jesus.
Right, this is what we've been through earlier was just
Yeah.
like that's how they can try to legislate or try to stigmatize like being trans out of existence by saying, oh, these are all fetishes, they're all like they're all AGP, derogatory, and it's just just their method of just saying there's no actually legitimate people who are trans and be like,
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to these emails, I think nothing here is really surprising. They're planning their own plays. We already know that they're against the broader trans lobby. Some of them are going to be only against the trans kids thing. That's kind of a hot button issue. Some of them are just going to be against all trans stuff. So this is not like necessarily surprising, right?
it's not
I think some
surprising, but it is interesting watching them like internalize and just like jumble up things,
yeah,
just throw
like
ideas at
trying
the
to plan
wall
out
when it
their
comes
yeah.
do their little war room thing.
Yep. Yeah. It's always interesting when this sort of thing kind of gets leaked to the internet. I'm sure somewhere there's like a bunch of left-wing people who are like, man, all these videos of like drag queens dancing naked around children, they're kind of ruining our movement. How do we respond to this? And they're like also doing their war room thing. They're also planning, you know.
I'm
Definitely.
sure.
Yeah, this is pretty normal. Shit. I guess there's one thing I wanted to ask you.
Do I go through
Taftach.
like the articles and stuff?
I mean, we could. The articles are just like hold on, we're like, you know, this is just an article talking about the leak, right?
I
So
will say
kind
you
of
did link the PLOS study or like an article talking about it.
what's the PLOS study? Which one is that?
It's one that uses like a 2015 survey data
Let me find
to
it here.
conclude that
Is it this
HRT is
one?
effective. Yeah, that's the one.
Better mental health found among transgender people who started hormones as teens.
That's like no
And then-
shit.
No, it's not
Like-
like no shit. This is very debatable.
No, I don't think it is. It's
It
just like,
definitely is. Because look at
it
this.
worked for you,
Look
didn't
at
it?
this. The study, which appeared online January 12th in PLOS 1, it's
Let
the
me zoom
Turban
in.
study, drew on data from the largest ever survey of US transgender adults, some of which took HRT as minors. And it uses this survey that was done in 2015. And then you can actually look into this survey. There's like a big report on it. And at the very
Okay.
end, like the people who did the study themselves, they say, yeah, we don't think that this survey is representative of the general trans population.
Let's see.
And it's
Let me look it up.
because it's not a random sample. Basically, they like went to gender clinics and like LGBT activist organizations and told them to like recruit people. So it's a little bit like going to like Black Panther parties and asking them like about
Are you
Black
oppressed?
issues. Yeah, something like that, right? Where it's
Is
probably
this-
not a very good.
Is this it here?
Yes, that is it.
But they're not just
Represent-
asking the groups; they're also conducting a survey on a
see, though.
27,000 individuals. Though.
Yeah, but
Representing
it
approximately
matters how they
0.5
got
of population.
how they
Trans
recruited them.
trans persons in Canada depend on family physicians for both general transition related care. They receive little no training. Okay.
Wait, this is 2015, right?
Yep. December
Oh, wait,
17th,
hold on,
2015.
hold on. This is how many? What's the sample size on this?
433.
Yeah, that's a
Age
different
16
study
and up.
then, because the
Oh,
one
okay.
that it's like a really big survey. That's why they quote like the tens of thousands of people in the article.
Is the name of it in here?
I could find it real quick.
I assume you talked about this last night on the panel, right? With counterpoints and Taftach. No, that's you. And Erudite.
Yeah, the study I think came out later. It's the survey which was done in 2015.
Okay.
Here, I've pulled it up.
Let's see. Okay, I've got it.
Researchers analyzed data from 2015 survey, which
Yeah.
you took
Access
away.
to gender. Yeah, January. Oh, so it was published January 12th, 2022, but the survey was done 2015.
Yeah, it says that. It says that in the methods section.
Right.
But basically, Turbin is like well known. He's the author of the study for being like
Jack L. Turbin.
very aggressively pro HRT for minors and like
Mhm.
completely overstating the case. So if we're talking about like right wingers who start with the conclusion in mind and like work backwards from that, he's been criticized for doing the same thing. And this study is like, I think, arguably one of the examples of like not the best data or science on
Okay.
this issue.
Let's see. The objective to examine
I don't know if
associations
I
between
necessarily agree with that. I feel like
recalled.
they would have to manipulate a lot of data.
Well, it's
When-
just not
when it comes
representative,
to like
or there's no reason to
Let's
think
see.
it would be.
Let's see. So, to examine associations between recalled access to gender-affirming hormones during adolescence and mental health outcomes among transgender adults in the U.S., we conducted a secondary analysis of the 2015 U.S. Transgender Survey, a cross-sectional non-probability sample of 27,715 transgender adults in the United States, using multivariable logistic regression, adjusting for potential confounders. We examined associations. Okay, so results. 21,000 reported ever desiring GAH. Of these, 8,000 and some never accessed it. 119 accessed it in early adolescence. 362 accessed it in late adolescence. 12,000 accessed it in adulthood. After adjusting, accessing GAH during early adolescence, late adolescence, or adulthood was associated with lower odds of past year suicidal ideation when compared to desiring but never accessing GAH. In post hoc analyses, access to GAH during adolescence was associated with lower odds of so the conclusion was access to GAH during adolescence and adulthood is associated with favorable mental health outcomes. Right. So this is the argument that if you give kids who need hormones before they're 18, if you give it to them, they'll have better mental health outcomes as adults. That's the argument here.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And you said
which
that
to
there's
me it seems like no shit because like if I had started hormones earlier on, I would like be able to pass better without needing to need like surgeries or procedures,
Mhm.
and yeah,
um
I would have
wh-
had better mental
what
health.
what was the problem with the data?
Basically, the way that they got the data was by like reaching out to LGBT organizations and telling them to recruit people. So it was a non-random sample.
Well,
And
Right.
I can like
like
link you
where
the survey. They themselves say that it's like should not be taken as representative of
Do they
trans
say
people
it
in
in
general.
methods?
It is not. It's in the actual survey report itself. So I will link that. 1 second.
but they're
Okay,
still
sure.
asking the individuals rather than the group, though. Like the individuals in the group might feel a certain way, but that's because they're trans. So,
Maybe. I gotta look at it and see. It's possible.
and I feel like if anybody is a representative for what this sort of effect can have, it should be like trans people.
It's just
Sure,
awful
sure.
science. Like this is not how you get good data.
Yeah, if you're going to activist groups and asking their members to give you a position, it's going to be slanted in favor of the activism. Like that's obvious, right?
The other thing is it's an online survey, so a lot of times the answers are just like very inconsistent, and there's certain like data collection errors. There's a pretty good write-up on this study and a number of studies that I can also link you. It's done by the reporter Jesse Singal, but he touches on this.
But Jesse Segal's an anti-trans.
No, I
like,
disagree.
activist,
He's
so.
like he, for example, wrote an article talking about how these trans bans are not appropriate and how they're bad science. So like, and he personally believes that like some, young people, adolescents should be given gender affirming hormones, but he does viciously critique this study and others.
Yeah, I mean, I watched your talk with Counterpoints and an Erudite last night, and I basically fall on the on the idea that there should probably be more gatekeeping regarding transitioning, but that we shouldn't be blanket banning it for kids. That seems like it's a bad idea. I think we're going a bit too fast into pushing them into it. We've kind of gone off the rails a bit, but a blanket ban does not seem appropriate.
Yeah, so this is from page 30 of the actual survey report. It says,
Okay, let's see.
although the intention was to recruit a sample that was representative as possible of transgender people in the US, it is important to note that the respondents in this study were not randomly sampled, and the actual population characteristics of transgender people in the US are not known. Therefore, it is not appropriate to generalize the findings of this study to all trans people. And that's NCTE themselves who are saying this. Also, NCTE, the organization that did this study, they have like a political agenda as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons to kind of be a little bit skeptical of this data in particular.
There's enough reasons to be skeptical, but like it would be pretty difficult to like come out with a conclusion that's like counter to this, though. Like,
Yeah,
just because the study's methodology could be better, like I would of course prefer this to be like a completely randomized sampling for all trans people across the board. Like, but like
good luck getting
I don't
that.
think good luck doing that. And first of all, and even if we did that, I don't think like the results would be run counter to the results shown here.
Well, there's also the issue, like, let's say you actually did want to do a study like that, like a real study that could hold up. You'd have to get a bunch of trans people or people who have gender dysphoria, and then you have to say, okay, well, some of you are going to be randomly in a control group where you don't get transitioning. Good
Mhm.
luck getting that like passed through an ethics board. You know what I mean?
Well, also good luck getting people to like accept that and get into that, because
Yeah.
that's been tried. That's been tried in the UK, for example, and a lot of the adolescents who were offered that option to participate in the study just said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'd rather do some other option. Imagine doing that in the US where you have dozens of private clinics and providers. People are just going to go to whoever's going to write the prescription at the end of the day. And that is
Yeah,
why
they're gonna doctor
personally,
shop. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's why personally, I do think there needs to be some coordinated restriction on who is getting access to this because of the fact that people are just going to find whoever gives it out. I think there needs to be like some unity in response where everyone or a majority of clinics are saying, okay, we're going to allow people to transition, but in order to get that, you have to enroll in a study where potentially you are put in a treatment group, a control group, where you are just given psychotherapy, right? And maybe that's only 10-20% of the people who are put in that, but that's way better. And now you've got this sampling and you can compare the results and actually get some good data.
So when I was
I
watching,
feel like that would be pretty unethical. Like,
yeah, it'd be hard to. It's necessary, but it's
Bioethicists
necessary, but it's
are
unethical.
the worst. They don't.
Yeah, we need to bring back the Stanford prison experiment. Bring
Mhm.
all that shit back. Okay, when I was listening to you and Erudite talk last night, you both seemed to agree on the basic, and I agree too. You both seem to agree on the basic idea that like the data showing the efficacy of transitioning is weak data, but it's all pointing in one direction. It's all
Yeah.
saying that it probably works, but it's not conclusive.
Yeah.
Is that pretty much your position?
Mhm.
And I think like there was like the post show argument where you were saying that we need more data, and she was saying, well, since it's all going, I don't want to mischaracterize anyone. She was saying, since it's all going one way, we should just do that. Was that basically what she was saying? Do
Just
you
do
remember?
what? Like get more data or?
Oh, no. She was saying that because the data is all pointing one way, we should assume and transition people as treatment. Is that basically what she was saying?
Yes, I believe that's what she's saying. I think her position is that she thinks it's very unlikely that it turns out there is some harmful effect. And I'm more skeptical. One of the reasons I'm more skeptical is because there are certain variables that are not being considered in these studies. So, for example, you could find out that HRT has, in general, like a null or slightly positive effect, like, 10% increase in mental health. Well, if that's the case, I don't know if a 10% increase in mental health is worth lifelong medicalization and potential for like increasing social contagion or cementing a gender identity. So these are like a few issues that I think that even if it is slightly positive and not actively negative, still justify putting the brakes on things. And I think she said that she had to like think about that a little bit more. Part of the issue with that is that like it's not disproven. Social contagion is not disproven. There's some reason to suspect that it might be happening, but there's also not really good data to suggest it is either. So it's just also not explored.
Yeah. I mean, my intuition tells me that social contagion is probably a part of what's going on right now. It just seems like I hate using the phrase, but it seems just kind of self-evident, you know? Like
Right.
if we accept that video games and movies can like spread ideas, if we accept that fucking Stardust platforming Richard Spencer is this grave sin because it spreads ideas, surely promoting trans people or trans ideology or trans whatever will spread the ideas and also cause people to want to do that.
But what
It all
what
works
if
the same way.
what if teens are just immune to propaganda in this one area? This is like the exception. They can be convinced to become anorexic or there can be suicide epidemics, but not with transition. I mean, that seems pretty hard for me to buy.
Yeah,
There's
that
like
seems
some
pretty
special
hard.
thing.
didn't the video game thing pretty much point to the opposite direction, though?
It did,
Or is
yes.
this like, there was all these people claiming that, video games are going to make people violent, they're going to make people criminals,
Yeah,
they're going to
true.
have, like, they're going to infect their minds and make them violent. But then actual studies are done, and it turns out that video games doesn't actually make people violent.
The one big study showed that like it didn't have any effect on women, and it made men more violent for like half an hour after the video game was played, and then it went back down to baseline. Like it wasn't a big deal, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like similar things could probably be like, people aren't usually going to be like, oh, wow, I learned trans people exist. I guess I'm gonna go cut my dick off now.
yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
it's exactly like that, but I think like
rare.
anorexia is a more direct comparison. That's why it always gets brought up, because it is this like body issue problem that is shown to be very like socially contagious, and there is like good data for that. So, or at least as far as I know.
and even though this is more intuitional reasoning than it is anything based on studies, but you do occasionally hear the story of like, oh, an entire classroom full of young girls has decided they're all non-binary. It's like, well, no. There's something else is happening there. Like,
Right. The chance
something
of
else
there
happened.
being social contagion or some other explanation is higher just than the probability that all of these people happen to have the extremely rare GID disorder, right?
Yes,
Just
exactly,
like
right.
pure statistics, that's so unlikely that there's probably something else going on.
I'm gonna go to the washroom. I'll be back in a few minutes if you two want to talk amongst yourselves. And then I guess we can read the super chats because I think we've come to the end of this unless there's anything else we want to talk about. But
Yeah, I think I'll probably
I'll
head out
BRB.
soon. But I'm also gonna get water, so
Oh,
back.
okay.
Yeah, I might as well get use my.
Oh no,
bathroom.
it's just gonna be
I wanna
quiet
use
for
the
the next
bathroom.
minute.
Yes, that's
Okay,
space.
here. Okay, hold on. You two go, and then I'll talk, and then I'll go after you two come back. Okay.
Okay, I'll be
Alright.
back.
All
Alright.
right.
So, chat, how's it going? Oh, the camera's gone. What's going on, chat? Here, I'll take this away. I'm sure Taftach will return momentarily. Don't leave! No, I'm right here. What's going on, chat? How are you? How do you feel? Quick, while Dev is gone, make out. Jesus. They'll be back, and we will read the super chats, and I will ask them all of your questions. You got triggered during the Blanchard talk, really, Val? Why? Do I need help? No, I'm fine. I love Lilith, but the confirmation bias is strong. Yeah. I love Lilith too, but she has like a clear bias when it comes to trans stuff. I don't blame her though, because she is trans and she's also been treated poorly in real life, like touching grass, real life, not internet stuff. She has been treated poorly, quite poorly for being trans. So I understand that she's like very protective of this conversation. I don't think that she's dumb or anything, but you know, everyone has biases, right? I have a bias. So do you. I understand Lilith's biases. I don't hold them against her. I understand them. Even though I disagree with her a lot, I understand them. Dev, when you were saying it's rude to misgender trans people in general or only to their face, probably in general, I think. Uh-oh. YouTube says my stream is down. Can you guys still hear me? Child transition really gets my goat. Like, I understand welcome back.
Thank you. I'm back.
I understand, like, lots of people, I think, just intuitively feel really bad about child transition, and it makes sense, right? Because these are kids. It's somewhat irreversible, and, like, we don't let kids make irreversible decisions until they get a little bit older. Why shouldn't this be in the same boat? That all makes sense. The counter argument seems to be that, you know, if dysphoria is a medical condition, and if the best science is transitioning, then you want to. If confirmed, and I had the conversation with Shed Logic actually, where basically it was like, you should let kids transition. Welcome back. You should let kids transition, but there has to be some very strict gatekeeping on it. You can't just have the door open and let anyone do anything. Like that seems to be the proper balance. Something
That's
like that.
actually my position too, and it also helps to make distinction between like when you're talking about kids. What are you talking about? Are you talking about like 2-year-olds, or are you talking about 14 or 15, 16-year-olds?
Yeah.
Like
For
I
sure.
feel like definitely for like
Here,
for
I'm
kids
gonna piss though,
below,
but I can still hear you. I'm gonna piss though, but you two talk. I'll be back.
Yeah. Okay. I definitely
Hi,
feel like
Lilith.
for people under 18, there should be like very strict like medical supervision to make sure that they are trans before they they should be given any sort of treatment. For people that are like below like who are like 10 or something, definitely like no surgery or whatsoever.
Below 10?
Yeah, or more. I think like below like 12 or 13. I think they shouldn't get like any sort of surgeries or treatments or HRT.
That is a
even like
really low bar.
because
I'd say surgery is
or
like
weren't you like
below.
it's definitely surgeries below like I think like 16 would be like the cutoff point.
Okay.
For surgeries, it would be like 16 is the cutoff point. Like nobody below 16. I don't think like for example like circumcision should be allowed for, definitely not infants. Oh, that would make. I'm not beating the anti-Semitic allegations from Dev the joke he made earlier for that opinion, but I definitely don't think like people under 16 should get any sort of surgeries whatsoever. For some even the ones that are allowed, like it should be like very, very rare circumstances and under extreme like medical evaluation. Like
So, how do you feel about the fact that we've seen in a lot of gender clinics, for example, the British clinic, Taftach, we saw massive increases in the number of people who were seeking these services, and it just got overwhelmed. And so, like, a lot of these providers simply could not train enough people to provide that kind of high quality care. It seems like if the expectation is that there's a rigorous process to make sure that people are not being, misdiagnosed, that's going to necessarily mean that a lot of people have to wait a lot longer, and also might just not get care while they're adolescents.
I think the biggest the way to address that would be to encourage for more like doctors to go into that field to begin with, I suppose, rather than skip the process altogether. Whereas it's like, I think in certain cases it's better to err on the safe side than to just automatically transition people, I guess. That's at least that's the way I feel. Even if like well, for example, like you transitioned when you were 16. Not 16, you transitioned when you were 14, right?
That's when I came out. I started HRT when I was 15.
Yeah, and I started HRT when I was 16. And like it was like, but if I came out when I was like 12 and I tried to seek medical intervention then, but because it was a different age and also it was like in a different country, it's like it wasn't as advanced. I didn't really necessarily receive the help I wish I could have gotten. But I feel like even in cases like me, it's probably better to make sure that people are actually trans rather than just automatically affirm them personally.
I think so too.
Even if there isn't just resources for it. The problem with there not being resources should be addressed by by encouragement of there being resources of maybe
socialism. God damn it. I always knew it. More taxes, more redistribution.
I mean, in theory, the free market should allocate more resources. Like, if it's profitable, and it seems like it is really profitable to provide trans healthcare, free market loves that. So yeah.
Yep. So my girlfriend has come home and she is making stew. So we should probably read.
I definitely do disagree with the notion that nobody should be allowed to do anything until like they're 18, because like they say like the transitioning is irreversible, but what else is irreversible is the masculinization from puberty. Like, and by that point, like the suicidality would have been increased, and like it was hell for me not receiving the treatment I did. Like,
Actually, here's okay. We have to do this final topic really quick because we're getting to the end. I put forward. I've had this kind of hypothesis where, like, in the future, if you have if there's a cure for gender dysphoria where you take a pill and now you're comfortable as the gender that is associated with your birth sex. So basically, the two of you would have taken a pill once you started exhibiting symptoms, then you would have been fine being men. Is that a good cure? Is that moral to do? Is that a trans genocide?
I mean, I think it's great, but
I think so too.
I think it would be great as an option, but what would be even better? It would be like if I can just take a pill and it would like turn me into the opposite sex in every single way.
You really want periods every month, Lilith? They're not that fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
I would rather have periods than
disgusting femoid.
I would also say I have that desire, right? Like, if you were to ask me to evaluate, like, the preference for living as a woman or living as a man, and, you know, being fully like a cis woman or being fully like a cis man, naturally I have the desire to be more like a woman, but I also recognize that that desire is not, I don't think that desire is like defining necessarily. I don't think I am that desire. And I think that if I didn't have that desire, I don't think it would be like a death of me or anything. I think I would just be myself, but maybe a little bit more well actualized. So yeah, I think that taking the pill is not like a moral transgression for that reason, that there isn't like identity death necessarily.
I feel like even if I did take that pill, that just make like dysphoria go away altogether. I would probably still want. I don't think I would lose the desire to present in a feminine manner.
You'd still be like a feminine man. Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
you'd be a femboy instead.
Even if such a pill that made all dysphoria go away completely, I don't think I would just be like, oh well, I guess I'm just gonna be a man and identify as such and be like, and start lifting weights and be a pussy football.
I know what you mean. Well, Val says the desire stems from the discomfort caused by dysphoria. So maybe the desire would go away with the dysphoria.
No, not all desire. The desire to be a woman, I think, is primarily dysphoria driven. But I also think that, like, if I were a man, I would probably just be like a feminine man, unless you removed like also my desire for like aesthetic preferences. So
yes,
right, yes. Yeah, because I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, again, mostly on Twitter, who are like, no, this would be a trans genocide. It means there's less trans people in the world because they're just happy being cis now. It's a trans genocide. And I'm like, well, hold on.
I would play devil's advocate. It would actually be trans genocide if it was enforced, if it was the only option available for people. Whereas it's like, oh well, such a pill exists, so we can just ban transitioning altogether now.
Yeah, but
no, nobody gets to go on hormones. I would say, like, I would not be okay with that.
I mean, I agree with you, but like, I don't think there's any treatment that's forced, right? Like, if you have cancer, you're not forced to get chemo, which is a good idea that you do. You know, you can choose not to. You can choose to go and rub some crystals together and rub some essential oils all over your body or whatever the fuck they do. It's not going to work, but you can choose that option. You know? So I don't think there's any treatments that are ever forced. I guess, like, in a future where you had a pill that cured dysphoria, would transitioning be viewed as like quack science? It might be.
I don't think so.
Yeah, or like a weaker version, a weaker option.
Yeah, it'd be like, I think it would be viewed as something like the way that like old medicine is viewed now. You know,
like taking.
I feel like it would be more realistic.
Yeah,
I feel like it would be more realistic for there to be like a measure to completely change a person's sex before we have the magic cure dysphoria pill.
I'm not sure.
Because like just the mental health is so complex and like there's so many aspects to it.
Yeah, but so are like,
and so intrinsically tied to a person's being than the rest of their body, I guess.
Yeah,
because you're
I don't
not your
know.
foot. You're like you're not your elbow. You're like the person that's thinking, creating the thoughts. It's in your head.
That's true, but I mean, I think we will learn to edit parts of people's personality before we learn to edit the entire body you inhabit. In terms of like scientific progress, I think changing the brain will come before changing the body.
I just disagree with that.
Guess we'll have to see. I have to see where science goes.
Super chats?
Yes, sorry about that. Sorry. Here, you know what? I'll refresh so I can see only the ones that are Taftach related. So if you want to leave early, you can.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I also have girlfriend responsibilities.
Does it involve stew?
Perhaps we are going to do something for dinner.
Come on. Let's see. All right. Real Holtzinator for $5. Hi, Dev, Lilith, and Taftach. I hope you're all well. It's nice to see you. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you,
Hello.
Sedator.
Yeah.
I hope you're doing well too.
Adherent to Lady Columbia, considering the makeup of the cast today, let's see how much brain rot we can mine from the chat.
Last time was crazy.
The chat's not been as bad as last time, but there's been a few people who have been a bit nuts. Let's scroll a bit.
Thank you for not being as nuts today, chat.
Mr. Bruh for £5. Taftach, could you explain your religion tier list from Twitter? Why do you hate paganism and the Baha'i faith?
I think paganism is like not really real. I think a lot of people who are like identifying as pagans are just like LARPers, and they don't really have any like traditions or people that they're actually connecting with, or they're not really doing things to make it real. And a lot of times I think it's just like a sort of facile rejection of Christianity and an exaltation, a worship of, you know, like white identity, which I think is very weak. I don't think it gives a lot of benefits that like religion traditionally has. I think that I don't know exactly what the category I put it in was. I think the category was like has potential or something. That's how I feel about paganism, where people could make it like something that is real and meaningful and provides deep purpose to people. But I don't think it's there yet. And I think the reason it's not there yet is because there's just not a lot of people who are putting in that work. So yeah. For the Baha'i faith, it's hard for me to get a good, like, hard for me to really get a beat on Baha'i faith. I think there's some like weird aspects to it. For example, like it's very like one world unification, but at the same time, it's like I feel like it's like a weird mix of like very progressive values that I don't agree with, and then very conservative values that I don't agree with. For example, like some homophobia and stuff. So that was my reason for ranking it lower.
Which is weird because lots of pagan faiths are super gay. Like,
well, Baha'i is different. It's like I wouldn't call it pagan. It's yeah.
Let's see here. What else? What else is a Taftach question? Hold on. $5 from Holtzinator. Lilith, Taftach, and Dev, in that order. What percentage of people who say they are trans are actually trans? Give your guesses. So Lilith first.
I would say like 85-90%, I guess.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think most people would necessarily lie about such a thing.
I mean, I have no
actually,
idea.
it depends on what you. I guess it depends on what you mean.
No opinion.
Because like, there are some people that just like call themselves trans as part of like the larger umbrella.
You've locked it in, Lilith. You now must stand and die by your number. That's how it is.
Oh no, the number I
you don't have a
up in my head.
You don't have a number, Taftach?
Actually,
So it depends on the definition, right? If trans is just anyone who identifies as gender nonconforming, whoever uses the label is trans, so it would be 100%. If the question is like who actually has gender identity disorder, and we assume that like the latest upswing of female transitioners, AFAB transitioners, are not trans, then I would say that like of the younger cohort, it might be like 60-40. That's like making a lot of assumptions and only looking at like the most recent wave to make that claim. But I also don't know like what percentage of trans people who identify as trans are a part of that younger cohort. But either way, it would be like a fraction of a fraction. And that's assuming that like a significant number of the female transitioners now are not actually GID. So a lot of assumptions, fraction of a fraction. Not exactly sure how that math works out, but yeah, that's my thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of similar. Like I just threw out a number, but you presented a more articulate way of saying it. It
Mhm.
really just depends on by trans. What do you mean?
Yeah, yeah. I think if we're actually talking about, the trans women that existed 10 years ago is going to be almost all of them, right? If we're talking about the on-campus weirdos who are now dominating, pride clubs and stuff, I think it's going to be less than 50%, for
Mhm.
sure. For sure, less than 50% of them are actually trans.
I wouldn't say that like
I
that
would
much.
absolutely. I'll stand up by my number. Fuck yeah. I was once a young communist lefty in university going to all these weird marches and shit. I remember exactly how it was. I definitely know. Um, let's see. Hold on. Where else is there? What is our response to Abigail Schreiner? Who's that? Does anyone know?
It's philosophy tube.
Oh,
Oh,
philosophy tube.
I don't watch philosophy tube, so I have no idea.
Oh
Neither
God.
do I.
I assume you.
I
Okay,
watch a little
hold
bit
on.
of Contra, but like,
Yeah,
not.
ContraPoints can be good sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Holzinator is bringing this up in terms of a trans conversation, so I assumed. Oh my God. Do you know the deep lore on philosophy tube?
I was there when the deep lore was written. Okay.
You know what's going on then. Okay.
I don't
How
know
valid?
enough about philosophy tube. I touch grass.
It's probably schizo-posting. It's probably not real,
You think it's
but
not real?
yeah, I think it's
It
like
seems that.
when you put like the red lines on like the cork board. That's what it feels like to me. Like you can
Yeah.
tell a convincing story, but like probably it's just so outlandish, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, you keep seeing outlandish stuff come out about bread tubers, like
Yeah.
story after story after story. I'm like, part of me wants to believe.
If you dislike philosophy tube, it's like a convincing conspiracy theory, but I
Yeah.
don't know. I think I have to err on the side of skepticism.
Yeah. Wait for the final piece to drop, just in case.
Innocent
So,
until
so
proven guilty.
yeah,
That's
Lilith.
the
The
way
deep
of
lore
looking.
here is that there's a bunch of circumstantial evidence that is not conclusive that philosophy tube transitioned because, as Oliver, he had like this weird obsession with ContraPoints that led to a possible how do you want to word this? He touched her inappropriately, okay? And then after her blanket rejection of him, he decided the next best thing was to transition to become exactly like ContraPoints. And now, as Abigail, she has been doing content that is identical to ContraPoints' content. It's like, if I can't have you, I'll become you. That's the schizo-post theory.
I think I heard
Basically.
something like that, but yeah, I don't know how true that is because
There's a lot of evidence that is not conclusive, but it is like there's enough evidence to ask the question, is this true, but not enough to answer definitively yes. It's a very entertaining story, though, that's for sure. 4chan loved it when they put all the pieces together. Um,
Sure.
is there any more Taftach questions? Let's see. Oh, this is in response to your birth certificate comment, Taftach. Artemis Fowl, $20. Certificates of live birth are important to track personal background information and to know who you are. And that foundation of accuracy begins at birth. Allowing you to change it opens up identity theft on a grand scale. What do you think of that?
I'm not sure. I think maybe this is also just like a question of values, but like I'm somewhat resistant to the government tracking everything about people. So I know there's issues with like name changes that are like sort of similar, and people will make the argument that like the state has an interest in tracking your name changes, which I think is maybe right. But like the solution with name changes isn't that you are not allowed to change your name, it's that there needs to be like a paper trail for if you do change your name. So my sense is that if you are changing your birth certificate, the appropriate response is just to have like a paper trail, so that if there is like some essential reason why people need to know, they can like follow that. But otherwise, you can use that birth certificate for everyday things like driver's license and whatnot, and that will show female, and that's probably fine.
Mm-hmm. So you do the same thing. You could have like, oh, in a history somewhere, it goes like this was changed from M to F at some point, but on the actual piece of paper you have at your house, it just says F. Kind of like that, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just don't know how like necessary it is, like for there to be like for the government to know at all times, like your birth sex. I mean, if there's like a record and that's kept, then yeah, I don't really have a problem with that.
I think if you're more libertarian minded on this issue, you'll probably fall on the side of like the government should not be tracking every piece of your info.
Right,
yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely don't think they should be able to prevent like a change completely, because like
yeah.
how relevant is it for the government to know your sex? I know it's very relevant for like medical associations to know, like, but I just don't know the utility, just how much utility there can be from not allowing the change, especially when alternative solutions could be a thing, like you said, like low tracking thing was just like just a little record showing.
Hey, Lilith, what video game are you playing? I can hear the clicking.
Yeah, we're getting to super chat, so I'm playing yours too. Because
okay, let me get through these then, so we can all go take a break. Ian for 40 shekels, thank you.
Thank you for the shekels.
Have any of us ever got an honest and non-recursive answer to the question, what is a woman from a progressive? The answer to that for me is no. I have not. It's always been women
definitions are hard.
Yep. It's always been like a woman is identifies as a woman. It's like, well, no, it's not. No. I don't know if you want to answer that one, Lilith, but I'm gonna assume.
I just don't think like the adult human female definition is as concrete as people like Matt Walsh make it out to be, because like as the arguments point out, like it would necessarily exclude some women, like some cis women.
Based, exclude them. Get them out of there. Okay, what's next? Let's see. Obsidian, £2. Do any of us like pineapple on pizza with ham?
I don't hate it. I used to hate it as a kid. Like although I also hated like mustard and onion as a kid too.
On pizza or just in general?
No, just in general.
Okay,
but
Jesus, like mustard and onion pizza. Holy fuck. Yeah, I think it's okay. I if someone like gave me a pineapple pizza, I'd eat it, but I probably wouldn't order it myself.
Yeah, I wouldn't go out of my way. If it's like in a buffet and I was just like, okay, I had a bunch of like meat lovers and a bunch of Supreme and maybe some vegetable pizza, I would like to switch it up a bit. Like,
Yeah.
then maybe I'll have some pineapple on pizza.
You,
I'm not repulsed by
Taftach?
it.
I think it's pretty good. I'd go
Really?
for it. Hmm.
Oh, damn.
That sweet, that tang, contrasting with the more savory flavors. It's based.
Mm,
You just triggered a bunch of people, I'm sure.
yeah.
Good. Get triggered.
More than any other take you've had today.
This is the one that cancels me.
This is the one. I think that's it. There are a lot of there's a lot of just general questions, but I think Lilith and I can answer them. It's all just like questions about like news stories. Those are all the ones that are like directed towards you, Taftach.
Well, okay. I believe in you both. Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been
Of course.
lovely, both Dev and Lilith.
Sorry that it
Yeah,
took like
thanks for coming
3.5
on.
hours, but thanks for being here.
No, it's fun.
Yeah,
I-
this one's
I
3
had a great
hours?
time.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's been 3 hours. Yeah.
All right. Bye, guys.
Yep. See you
Bye-bye.
later.